Welcome back to the Brennan Page. I'm Dwayne Page.
And this is Kyle Brennan. Today we have the luxury of speaking with Tim LaMonte, who was the assistant hitting coach for the Cincinnati Reds, that's the big league team, from 2023 to 2024. Before that, he served as a minor league hitting coordinator for the New York Mets in 2022. Prior to that, he was the Double-A hitting coach for the Houston Astros, as well as the complex hitting coordinator for the Houston Astros. So, Dwayne, when I was first hired by the Astros, Tim was one of the first people I've met. For me as a 25-year-old entering pro ball with no prior experience in professional baseball, I didn't know the players or the coaches, and Tim just always found myself being joined by Tim for breakfast, lunch, and just talking through some different things about training, about hitting, sleep habits, just how to connect with players, just anything. He was always easy to talk to, and we naturally just hit it off right away. So we've stayed in touch over the couple of years, and it's been good today to hear what some of his experience are growing up and prior to pro baseball, and then we got to pick his brain about his thoughts on hitting at the highest level, and then some different leadership talks. So I really enjoyed this one. This could have went for another couple hours, so it's a sign of a good episode.
Yeah, I think saying easy to talk to is a very good way to describe Tim. He and it's no surprise to me that he was somebody that you gravitated towards in your early years with pro baseball. More than a pleasure to have on this podcast, and like you said, I definitely could have imagined us talking for several more hours with him, and because it went in all directions. But I do feel like this episode is very, very dense in content, and I feel as though it's going to be a good one to listen to. Very informative, and we're talking about relating things at the private travel baseball level to the professional level, and I think it'll be a good one for all people interested in the baseball or athletics world to listen to. So again, I appreciate his time so much. That was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, that balance of like home versus away in pro baseball, I guess baseball in general, the college would be the case also, but it's like trying to find a situation where you're doing something you love and you're with players all the time and you're doing good work and you're also in your family, and you have some sort of a balance in that sense, or you could travel at least. It's so complicated.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I'm pretty much, my son, he just graduated from high school last year, played baseball, and I missed his whole high school career. I think I saw like 2 fall games. I didn't see any spring games, and it's, the trade-offs that you got to take, I guess, to be in that world. But
yeah,
it's been one of the nice things about not going back to affiliate ball this year. I was kind of interviewed for a lot of different positions, and was kind of holding out for either the perfect thing or I was just going to stay home. And perfect thing didn't come through.
Yeah, well, I mean, between the experience you've had thus far and valuing some things at home, something will work out. Or you'll like what you're doing now and just kind of keep rolling with it. But it's the uncertainty of everything is the tough part, isn't it?
Very tough. Yeah. The health insurance is not quite as good when you're self-employed.
Yeah. I hear I think that the whole sacrifice thing is something that you get exposed to pretty early, and it's obviously a lot more simple than missing your kids' games. It's more or less like missing some birthday parties when you're 12 years old and, playing baseball, and you're like, oh shit, I'm missing this, or you're missing like a friend's communion. You start to get a little bit older, you might miss like your friend's kid's baptism, stuff like that. But, your son being, you said he just graduated high school, mm-hmm. right? So him being a senior in high school and having that experience with you doing what you've done for so many years, was there like an understanding there from his side of things, because he's experienced, I'm sure, some sacrifices as well with the game.
Yeah, 100%. I think so. If you back up to when I first got into pro ball, I was older. I was 40. I think I was 40 when I got into pro ball, and my daughter had just graduated from high school. She was living with me, and she went down to the University of Houston. And so she was out of the house, and so my son was still living with my ex-wife. But at the time, like, obviously I was taking a pay cut more or less to go from teaching to coaching affiliate ball. And so first I had to check with the wife. The wife was like, "Yeah, you got to do this." And then the next call was to my son, and because he's in eighth grade or seventh grade at the time, I can't remember what it was, and uh, and yeah, he was super excited for me to go do it, and I don't think he would trade it, to have me home at all. Like he had some pretty cool experiences in the years I was in the minor leagues and in the big leagues.
That's good to hear that, that he valued what it was that you're doing and he appreciated it. I want to back up though, because you and I had met in, I'd say after your 40s, once you got in the pro ball. I think you were with the Astros for a year or two before I joined. Um, but I want to go through the backstory. You said you were teaching. Let's back up and start when your baseball experience as a player and coming up. Who's Tim? What's Tim like as a kid? What's that experience
Gotcha.
like?
Yeah, so I was, I don't know, your typical kid who was probably an an early achiever type baseball kind of sports. I played everything. I was um, up to 14. I was pretty much the best player in every team I played for, depending on baseball, football, basketball, didn't matter. So at that point, my dad was my coach. Big fish, small pond kind of syndrome. I thought I was going to be, great. And I think the first time I realized that I was a big fish in a small pond was I'd gone off to, I think I was 14. I'd gone off to a baseball camp and was around other kids as big and strong as me, and was like, oh crap, I'm not as good as I thought I was. Going to high school, had a nice high school career. Then, but back then there was no showcases. It was just, you play high school baseball, you get seen, you don't, whatever. But there was this one showcase for people who hadn't signed, for seniors who hadn't signed, and went to that. I think I went 4 for 4 or something, got their scholarship. And at the time I could take that scholarship to any college I wanted to. It wasn't attached to a school. So I used that scholarship and just went to the local junior college, the one that was closest to me. Played baseball there. Just quickly found out that I was not going to be a big leaguer. And my little brother was real good. He was 6 years younger than me. And I kind of just wanted to coach. I decided not to go off to a 4-year and play, and spend a bunch of money because I wasn't going to be able to be a scholarship kid or anything. So I hung him up and went right into coaching. Coached my little brother for a year, then moved on to a different organization. Did that through college. Graduated college fairly quickly, and then went into high school coaching pretty much straight away.
So that awareness, this is something that Dwayne and I have talked about with other guests. The awareness as a 14-year-old, where or up until you said 14, and you're one of the best players on the field, if not the best player on the field, to then realize that, oh, that's not the case. I'm not maybe as good as I thought I was. That, I imagine, had to have been a tough transition. But I appreciate the awareness you have at that age, just to say, oh, like, I'm not what I think I was.
Yeah, I think again, I think when you're that age, you're trying to figure so many things out, right? I mean, I'm working with kids that age right now, and your hope as a coach is that you can somewhat provide a roadmap for them and show them that, like, okay, I've been there, I see where you're at, but if this is what you want to do, these are the steps you need to take. obviously there was no internet when I was growing up. I didn't have access to information. All I knew was what my dad told me or what I saw on the field. And um, I think I don't know. I think it's kind of my personality to always kind of question things, question myself and others. And I just I knew in high school, like I made varsity as a freshman, never played JV, all that kind of stuff. But then you're playing with 18-year-olds and you're 14, and you just realize you're like, man, this is hard. I'm going to have to really work. It's not just my talent at this point. And I think I had a good work ethic, but I didn't know what to work on. I mean, I just went in the weight room and bench pressed the damn house and ended up with a bad shoulder and like just did dumb things that I would never let a kid do now. And then, get to junior college in the mid 90s, and you can imagine the Mexican pharmaceutical industry boom. And I wasn't doing that. So I wasn't even a great junior college player.
Yeah, the environment around you can definitely influence what you're doing, and you're talking about the era that you came up in, kind of influencing what that meant to, like you're working hard, but looking back on it, you're like, shit, there's probably a couple things that I would definitely advise against. There's probably some concepts you can take from what you did as far as working hard and being kind of like relentless in your efforts to become the best baseball player you could be. Like that concept definitely sticks, but just I guess the way you went about certain things is, a little bit different than you would have players do now.
100%.
I was curious, what position or positions did you play?
I was a middle infielder. I did play a little first base because I had a bad hamstring for a minute, but I'm 5'7". I'm not a big guy at all. So, but yeah, middle infield. Played shortstop by necessity for a little bit until one was healthy enough to take it back, and then I went back to second.
Nice. It sounds like similarly to myself, it was kind of, this is over for me as a player, like jump right into coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had a similar experience. And I think, that kind of helped quell any saltiness I might have had as a player, because getting into coaching was so exciting for me. And in those first couple of years, it was just jump right in 100%. It was, coaching a high school. First I started out at junior college, and I was coaching varsity baseball, and it was, camps, you name it, everything I could possibly, get my hands on. It was a lot of fun. But what now I feel, I've been coaching since I was a freshman in college. So it's been about 10 years, and I find myself having conversations with guys. I'm at a Division III college now where they're talking about, the end of their career. They're getting to the end of the road themselves, and having conversations like we're having now, talking about transitioning to different things. I got guys that I coach that are into coaching now. It's not always the easiest transition for those kinds of, for just baseball people in general, because it's a 365-day a year type of grind sometimes when it comes to baseball. It's something like I've had players talk to me about, it's the only thing that they have. It's the only outlet. Do you ever have like conversations with players like that about like the whole, the other side of things, like kind of tell them about your story or things to that degree?
Yeah, I think kind of what Kyle asked me, when I was 14 or whatever. I think the hardest thing is most people who end up being pretty good at this game started when they were around 4, right? And 4 or 5, and it's what they've, like, their family vacations are built around their baseball tournaments, and their whole identity is wrapped up in being a baseball player. And mine was as well. That was something that I had to, ironically, I kind of tried to shed that before I got into pro ball. I wasn't even coaching when I got the call to go coach for the Astros. I had my son, like his little t-ball team or whatever, but I wasn't doing lessons. I wasn't a high school coach. I was in the process of kind of shedding that skin of being just a baseball guy. I didn't want to go to a family function and only talk about baseball. I didn't want to go, to a restaurant or a bar and meet somebody and all they wanted to talk about was baseball. I was trying to get away from all that. So I think having gone through that process before I got into pro ball, and then I'm meeting people who that truly is their identity. That's what they are. It's how they make their money. Just gave me some perspective to talk about life in general that wasn't baseball related. And some of my best relationships that I still have are with some of those players that I talk to uh, quite a bit. Some of them are still in the game, some of them are out. But it is a tough thing, but it is a reality. Like, we can't play this game forever. And even the people that I see in pro ball, that like a lot of times the coaches that are there because they don't know what else to do with their life. So they just, they quit, they finish with pro ball and they go back into coaching. And it's not even, not everybody, but there's definitely some that I'm not sure they even really love coaching. They just don't know what to do without that life.
That's such an interesting point. What you're describing is the reason I didn't get into coaching at first, because I had some experience with coaches in college and summer ball and whatnot, and lessons and all that growing up, where it was like they're doing this because there isn't a second thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I always thought I had a second thing, so I was like, well, I'm not doing that. But you mentioned something, the identity that you have as a player, even if I think if you ask a kid, they say, I want to be a Major League Baseball player one day. But at some point, a lot of kids might not think that that's what they want. Um, and even if they don't see that as what they're going to be doing when they're 25 or 30, it's kind of all they're doing now, to your point, where their Easter break is spent in a high school season. And then you have that a couple parents take off of work a couple times over the summer, and it's to go to this tournament and that tournament. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times it's not like they're in destination locations. They're just these random towns that happen to have a baseball complex. And you're showing up, you don't want to be there for an extra 2 days. There's nothing going on. So your hotel pools and maybe a little outlet mall is your experience. But um, you two both have something in common that's different for me, in that you guys identify as a player and then seem to switch to coaching before your playing career ends. Um, so that's not something that I relate with much. Can you talk about that?
I think um, I think having my little brother, again, he was 6 years younger than me, so it's not a huge gap, but it's a pretty decent little gap. Like, I'm in college when he's getting into high school and all that, and he was really good. Um, he was in a big 6A, would be 6A now, high school in Dallas area, that was a good baseball school. He was all state as a sophomore, and then tore his labrum. Just have it had offers from all sorts of schools and whatnot. And my dad was his coach. My dad had kind of transitioned. He kind of passed me off to my high school coaches, and then he just sunk all his effort into my little brother. And they were like the same personality. They were both like very um, aggressive personalities. So they would just butt heads. Like, it was, and so I felt like I was coaching. I was always the middleman between them, and trying to kind of help him, and save him from my dad, um, while I was still playing. And so it just was like pretty natural for me to kind of transition into coaching. And I kind of felt like one of the reasons I went into teaching right away was I just enjoyed coaching, teaching, whatever it was, just helping people navigate life in some way. Um, so, I mean, it was very natural for me. I don't know about you, Dwayne, if that resonates or not.
Yeah, I mean, me having, I have two younger brothers. One of them played ball, and the other one not so much. But and I have a younger sister as well. But I've always kind of been, like you described, with the buffer between parents and the other siblings. I've always had that. I've had experiences with my brother. My one brother who played, he's 4 years younger than me, where you're constantly trying to. I've had some times where it's like, yo, like, let's go outside and hit, let's do this, and he's like, no. And it's like dealing with a little bit of stubbornness. And later in life, it became more of him just subtly because my brother is a very intelligent young man. Like, he's a very, very smart dude and likes to do things his way, and doesn't always take well to getting help. So there were times where I wanted to help him, and I was like, I fucking, I see this, I see what I could be helping him with or whatever, and he's just like, no. And then I'm like, shit. And like I said, later in life, it was a lot easier. But I did, and it was unbeknownst to me, but at the time I was learning different strategies to deal with that. It's because you're gonna get players that are like that. Um, And you don't consciously do this because, I'd never planned on being a coach when I was, in high school baseball or anything like that. I wasn't aspiring to be a baseball coach later in life, but, as a teammate too, I always sought leadership positions. I always, and not in ways where I'm just pumping my chest and saying that I'm the leader of the team, but I, was showing up early. I was the last one on the field, early work, late work, those kinds of things. I was a guy that wanted to win every single game we played. It didn't matter if it was a summer league game, in some crappy field around the corner from where I was living, or some big Ripken tournament or something like that. Like, I wanted to win every game, so the effort was always there. I would do whatever it took to help the team. I felt like I embodied those things. I was never, the most talented player by any means, but when I got into coaching, I'd felt that. I had felt that I wanted to help other people. I liked watching my teammates be successful. I liked watching, your team celebrate after a walk-off win. That stuff still, we actually had a game yesterday where we walked off, and that stuff still just makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up just thinking about, watching the guys out there, going nuts after a big win. But I liked seeing other people be successful, and I liked being somebody that somebody felt could confide in. So I always enjoyed things like that. And then, it felt nice being around other good coaches when I was a younger coach, and them being like, dude, like, you could do this, you could do this. So I got really good encouragement early on from people that were mentors to me too. So it was a very positive experience getting into coaching, and I'm, super grateful for the guys that I surrounded myself with.
Yeah, I can resonate with that as well. My first my first job as a high school coach was actually with my high school coach that I played for, and ironically, when I played for him, I never felt like he loved me, like I was his guy or anything. I kind of like he was probably, you know, the bad guy in my nightly thoughts of like why I didn't succeed or do well or whatever. And then when I went to work for him, he ended up being pretty much a second father to me, a mentor. He was amazing. To this day, if you ask me, the greatest leader of men that I've been around who could coach anything, it's this guy. And he, I learned so much of what I took on, I still use today, that I took all through that I learned from him. And if I hadn't had him, I don't know, that I would have stuck with it.
That perspective change from as a player, it sounds like you didn't have the greatest relationships. But then you go on to say that he's an excellent leader of men. Do you think, I guess, could you clarify, do you think he was that same leader when you were a player and you just, it was just tough love kind of a thing? Or
Yeah,
was there a shift in him?
I think probably a little of both, but I think mainly it was more a shift in me. I think I was, again, I was immature, like, not, I'd always been successful, and I was tasting my first uh, uh, failure, and he understood that you can't have, uh, we had two coaches. You can't have two bad guys and you can't have two good guys. You got to have a balance, right? And our other coach was kind of the good guy, so he kind of had to be the tough one when I was coming up. Um, and he just he was going to he was going to put you in situations where you're going to fail and see how you react, and then allow you to figure it out or not figure it out. And if you didn't figure it out, somebody else was going to play. And as a coach, I can respect the hell out of that. As a player, I wasn't old enough or mature enough to really understand it at the time. Um, I just wanted somebody to kind of say, yeah, you're gonna be fine. And ironically, I can point to tons of times where he did do that. I just didn't see it. I just didn't see it when I was a kid.
Yeah, that's relatable as hell. For me especially, I got to my first coaching job other than the junior college and some travel ball was at my old high school as well. So I got to coach alongside with guys that I had previously. And when I was coming up, it was tough. You know, there it was a tough environment in a sense that like I wouldn't compare it directly to the sound bites or videos or anything you see of like Augie Garrido, but it was like you don't get it when you're a high school kid, but it's about your life, you know, and it's about the way you go about doing anything, you know, and as you get into coaching, you're like, holy, you know, like I this is necessary, you know. Things have to look a certain way, which the head coach over at the college that I coach at right now, he says it all the time. Whether we win a game or lose a game, there have been times where we won games, but everybody knows the four coaches that we have there, we're all looking at each other, and the head guy's just like, it just looks like it just doesn't look right. It just doesn't look right. It just doesn't look right. And where you might be sitting on the player side of things, waiting for some praise from your coach, like, oh, you know, we just won a conference game or whatever. But it's, you know, we go over to the post game chat, and it's like that didn't look right. That didn't look right. That wasn't good. You know, that wasn't a good win. Like, good for you. We won the game and everything. That's great. You know, it's good for our conference schedule. It's good for seeding, all that stuff. But that just didn't look right. We need to go to work tomorrow. You know, so I comply. I agree with everything you said, and it's funny because of how much I connect with your experience as well, because mine was so similar to a T.
Yeah, yeah, it's I think I've listened to a few of y'all's podcasts, and I can't remember which one was which, but I think it may have been your most recent one. You were kind of talking about how kids today, and even at the big league level, like they don't know the game as well as they probably should. They can hit, they can throw, maybe they can run. Um, it, it's men like him and like who I hope that I coach like, but not who produce these kids, these dogs, whatever, that know how to play the game. They have that it factor, and like you're seeing less of them. I'm sorry, you're seeing less of these kids. I don't know if it's because of travel ball. I don't know if it's because of a cage culture. I don't. I think it's a mix of a lot of things. But there's less of these kids that have that ability to just find outs on the field and to uh, play chess instead of checkers, with the game. And it's, I, I again, that was me as I was dad coached. I didn't know the game as well as I thought I did. I could hit, I could throw, I could run, at least for high school. And when this man was trying to push me to learn, I wasn't ready for it at that time.
I think so much of that comes from the environment, where you have a high standard and a firm, like authoritative presence that is going to make sure that things improve, and it's not a lot of nice, comfortable discussions. They happen, but they're also mixed in with some, like, that wasn't it, like, get your shit together
Mm-hmm.
moments. And when you're at that impressionable age and someone holds you to that standard, some people are going to say, the hell with this. And some people aren't going to, they're going to crumble from it a little bit, but then there's going to be a small section of players that got better because of it.
Yep.
And if they didn't go through that difficulty, and it could have been on a Tuesday at practice in the spring when coach is yelling at you because you didn't hit the cutoff or something. If you miss that opportunity, you, as a player, you're robbed a little bit from learning to overcome some certain things. Um, I think I feel like that's one of the main reasons that you see less of those players, because when you listen to really anyone that we have these conversations with on the podcast or not, when they talk about important figures in their life, in their baseball life, they all seem to come from that middle school, high school range. When they had someone that maybe wasn't the best hitting coach they've ever had or the most knowledgeable baseball guy or this or that, but it was someone that took a similar approach with them at that point.
Yeah, I tend to wonder if like the way baseball has become a business for you don't really see um, volunteer coaches anymore. Like there's no like not if you're going to play at a high level, right? Like you have to play this club ball, and so there's not consistency like with the same person. You're jumping from team to team. Um, you're not playing like when I played. You played a couple nights a week of games. You practice with again a volunteer dad. A couple other nights a week, you might go play a few tournaments, but you're playing pretty consistently. And now it's like train all week, go play a tournament, maybe guest play with somebody else, play with a new team the next year. I just wonder if because you don't have that consistency that you don't get, and the coaches are trying to win now, right? Because it's a business. They're not trying to develop kids. This is where I kind of fall where I am right now in my kind of baseball journey, looping back into the development stuff. Is I just see this giant hole where there's just not development happening. Everything is about winning right away, and you can do that at 12, 13, 14 years old by just finding a bunch of kids who've already hit puberty and are swinging, really hot drop five bats, and they can throw hard, but they don't know anything about the game. And it's like, I don't know. I see just a huge hole in the system of development these days.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. I think it's just about it's about the reward system though, and they see kids aren't dumb. I think that it's it's perceived in a negative way, saying that intelligence as a whole has gone down in the player, but they take in the game in like a TikTok fashion, where it's just these clips of guys hitting bombs, guys throwing nasty stuff, which is important. It's important to be able to do those things to be successful in these games, but that's all they see, and then they're playing MLB The Show, and it's not about, it's not just about using the team that you get. Like, you don't just play a classic 1v1 and beat somebody with the team that you have. You're fashioning your team around guys that just hit bombs and throw nasty junk. It's even in the video games too. Like, I was talking to somebody about that the other day. I'm like, holy shit, it's even in the video games too. But they're not getting rewarded for those layers of thought. You're talking a little bit earlier, and I'm thinking about something that stuck out in my mind as a young baseball person was, the Derek Jeter play where he's coming out of nowhere and then making the flip to the plate, where it's just like that guy just has so many layers of thought, where he out of nowhere was just like, I got to be here because I see this errant throw happening. And then next thing you know, it's one of the more fantastic plays of all time. It's just about what's being rewarded. And then these coaches see that, and it's a business, like you said. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. It's about the whole win now thing. But I do think that there are some people that are starting to recognize the benefit of learning how to play the game, and learning how to play the game, whatever the right way means. And it's about the development at an early age, and it's about developing a love for the game. I think that we also lose some really good athletes to other sports at an early age because a kid might have a bad, which is crazy to say right now, but like a bad travel baseball experience at 8 or 9 years old, where they're, getting dumped from their team to pick up some, oversized 9-year-old that can hit the ball over the fence. Meanwhile, that kid probably could have been a great center fielder, but now he's playing lacrosse because he doesn't like baseball anymore because he couldn't hit home runs or anything like that. So I do think that that's another aspect of it.
Yeah, I just don't know what the answer is. We're not going back. We're not going back to Little League baseball. And sorry, I've got a zoo here, so if we get interrupted by a cat or something, sorry about it. But anyhow, yeah, I just don't. The thing that I keep going back to, the only thing I can think of is, parents got to educate themselves, and they have to take control over their kids' development, and the kid too, but like especially at young ages, like the coaches probably don't have long-term best interest in their kid's case, and so like making sure you don't blow your kid's arm out, or making sure they're getting the reps they need, like it's got to fall on the user, on the parent, and on the kid.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point there too. I feel I have spent, because I do private lessons, and I think I've spent so much time, especially, end of the night or the beginning of the day, because I usually get there early, and I'm talking to a parent, and that I feel for these people because there's so much desperation around what to do with their kids, and a lot of them don't know the baseball world like somebody like myself or you guys, or somebody better than myself. So it's just, I feel for these people. I don't have any kids personally, but you can see the worry and you can hear the worry in their voices when they're talking about what to do with their kids, how to get them the best experience possible. And I try to just say to them as much as I can, and in as, polite a way possible, is that you got to help, you got to put your kid with somebody that's going to help, like, develop their love for the game, that's going to care for them, that's going to care about their development, that's not going to just that's going to allow them to fail and hold them accountable, which is asking a lot. It's asking a lot. I feel like, and especially in today's day and age, you keep going back to the point of coaches are so win now, which I couldn't agree more with. And I'm trying to work in my brain what it is that we're supposed to do, but I think that's kind of why Kyle and I started doing this, was to have conversations with people like yourself and the other guys that we've had on here that have experience in this game, to kind of say, these are the kind of people you need to be surrounding yourself with. And if you can't, just inform yourself a little bit more to help with the development of your own kid. Because the solution right now is put your kid on this team, get him the hype fire, and then get him the best hitting coach in the world, and then he's going to just be all right. Meanwhile, it's finding coaches out there, putting them on teams where they're going to develop. And there's teams like that out there. I coached 16U this past summer. We went up to Binghamton for one of those showcase camps where, your team does the first day showcase day, and then they play in a tournament style. And we played against this team. I forget if they were from the Buffalo area or something like that, but we got freaking smoked by this team. And I'm talking to their coach because I just love the way their team played the game. And my team was good group of kids, quality baseball players. But this team looked like they've been playing together for 10 years. And sure enough, I spoke with their coach, and he's like, yeah, these guys have been together probably, since around the Little League time. And they, because you could tell with the way that they have coverage assignments, the way that they're doing back picks, the way that they're running the bases, like everything is just so crisp. And that team was fantastic. So it was fun to watch. We're getting our asses kicked, but I'm like, damn, this is a good baseball club right here. You can have an appreciation for people like that, and you could tell their coaches care about the kids, and the kids respected the coach. And I think respect is just not there either, because it's become a what have you done for me lately on the side of the player and the side of the coach. From the coach, it's what have you done for me lately? You haven't, you're 0 for your last 20. Screw you, you're on the bench. And from the player, it's what have you done for me lately? You can't help my swing. I'm not throwing any harder. I'm not getting my innings here. I'm not playing shortstop, which is where I want to play. Like, screw you. Like, I'm going to go to another organization. There isn't that dig in and, oh, you know what, I'm not playing short, but I could play left, I could hit, I could bunt, I could run the bases, those kinds of things. We just don't have an environment for that right now, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. No, those one-offs are there, and then they're great to see what can happen. But again, like when the options are so many for both the coaches and the players, like you're saying, then there's not that motivation to stick around and work through things and develop, and on either end. Again, I don't necessarily have the answer, unless, because you also have to, you have to get the buy-in from the parents, like, to not jump ship. There's just so many moving parts on those things. But I do have a question for you, Dwayne, because it's one that I get a lot and I don't really know the answer to, because the landscape has changed so much. But let's say you have a son who's 13 or 14 who's good, who looks like he's on track to be a college baseball player. What would be like 3 simple things that you would try to have them do to make sure that they have an opportunity to play, now that it seems like a lot of these colleges are trying to pick from the portal and not going after the high school kids as much? This is what I keep hearing. These parents are really concerned about, like, what do we got to do to be seen? Do we go to Perfect Game? Do we have to move and go to a better high school? Blah, blah, blah. And I know what my answer typically is, but it's because I'm not educated in it. So I give the most simple answer, which is be undeniable.
Yeah.
But other than that, what's some stuff you might have on that?
Yeah, I mean it is a tough time, especially when we're talking about trying to get high school players to play in a competitive Division 1 environment, even like local Division 1 schools, because they'll get the guys from the portal that might be coming from a mid-major or something like that. You hear stories of that all the time. But I think it's about being versatile. So, if your kid, don't be afraid of having your kid playing multiple sports, because I think being athletic, so I would say number one is put your kid in a situation where he could be as athletic as possible. I think being under the same I guess bullet point, you could say making sure that they have a good training regimen, they're getting stronger, they're getting more athletic. I think secondly, or this probably should be the top priority, is make sure your kid has good grades. Like having good grades is so important. That's just one thing to check off. And as a travel baseball coach and as a high school baseball coach, that's usually one of the first things that a college coach will talk about in regards to a player is their grades. And I know we're talking about baseball and playing at a Division 1 school or even 2 or 3, because it happens at those levels too as far as the portal's concerned. But I listen. I'm old school in that sense, where I do think that you need to be taking care of business in the classroom, because it does speak to the kind of person that you are. So those two things, and then the third one, it's tough because I want to say make sure your kids in a good organization or part of a good team, but it's like, do people have access to that? Is why I struggle to say that that's the third point and one of the more important things. But I have a hard time getting away from that. I do think that having your kid with somebody, with a program, with a team, it doesn't have to be the best team, right? I do still believe that college coaches are going to find quality baseball players. For us up in the Northeast, if you're part of an organization that you feel has good development skills, that has the vested interests of yourself and your kid in mind, and they're going to a tournament like a Diamond Nation. I don't think you need to be going to every single PG event if your kid's not a showcase player. Like, I definitely would like to pick your brain about that too, like being like a showcase guy versus somebody that a college coach or professional guys need to go and watch. But if not everybody is a showcase player, so if your kid is somebody who is playing with one of those organizations that is developing those skills and developing your kid into a good athlete and a good person and becoming more knowledgeable with the game, and you're going to a place like a Diamond Nation, or where there are going to be scouts, there's going to be guys. I've gone to that tournament every single year, and I do think that that's a quality tournament. No free ads for Diamond Nation, but you guys do a great job over there, But I think so. I think those 3 points stand out the most. Is that overall athleticism and strength training. I think being a good athlete, you cannot replace that, because it helps with the undeniable factor. Obviously, my dad said this to me when I was younger, and I said it to a freaking one of our underclassmen yesterday when he asked me, how do I get in the lineup next year? You got to rake, man. If you hit, you play. But if you're a good athlete and you got the hitting tool the hitting tool's on the way, you don't need to just be locked down to playing first base. You could go and play the outfield a little bit. So that athleticism and strength plays into that. The grades too, you don't want a roadblock to your recruitment process. I don't think there's anything wrong with being a junior college guy at all. I think that being a junior college guy could play to your advantage. And especially nowadays, I think getting those 2 years of development is awesome. And there are some really good junior college programs out there. But having that as a roadblock, it'll still be a thing if you go to junior college and just shit your pants in the classroom again. And then that third point, as far as your development, like, I have a hard time going away from that bullet point, because, all right, how else are you going to develop? If you're a parent that isn't, teaching your kid about the game, that doesn't know about the game, that cannot coach you to the point that you need, because I learned the game by I watched baseball every single day when I was a kid, and I had my dad talking to me about what was going on the field, and I knew every guy on the freaking Yankees lineup from the time I was like 4 or 5 years old. You didn't have to teach me what a double cut was because I knew what that was. But we're in a day and age where that's not the case. So I do think that being part of an organization or a program that has your development in mind, that's going to take that methodical approach in teaching the fundamentals of the game, I do think that I can't get away from that third bullet point.
Awesome. So you do think that like if they're, I always say with the showcase stuff, it's, you're either going to get exposure or get exposed. So
Yeah.
like make sure you're ready for exposure. But let's say you are. You do think that those are still a viable place for kids to go be seen, and for colleges to get put on those radars.
Yeah, I do. I do think they are. Like if you're a kid that's 6'5" and in a round of batting practice is going to freaking be around the wall or just hitting solid line drives gap to gap, and you run a good 60, and you have an 80 plus mile an hour arm from whatever your position is, but that's about knowing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think the other, because I say this to kids too sometimes, especially, I've talked to underclassmen in the past. I think it's just good to go there and get used to feeling like that, like how you feel when you're at a showcase. Because I remember that's, something that my dad did for me. I was 135 pounds as a freshman, maybe 5'9", 5'10". I wasn't big. I wasn't putting balls out consistently in BP or anything, but my dad was just like, let's go down to this showcase at the, local complex. There's, 20 colleges there. He's like, it's just going to get you used to being around like dudes with clipboards evaluating you, because that's what's going to be happening. So, I kind of echo the same thing to my players right now. Can it hurt? Maybe, but I don't think that coaches are so I don't think coaches are so ignorant to see somebody who's an underclassman at an underclassman showcase and think that they can't grow or develop. I do think that does happen, but it's not the end all be all. Like, I don't think that parents should be, spending a majority of their money on going to every single showcase, one side or the other of the Mississippi. You know what I mean? So,
Mm-hmm.
I guess as you guys are talking through that, the original question was basically, as a freshman, how are you attractive to a school when they can just go pick up someone that's already played a year or two in college against better pitching and all that. I think I'm not a college coach. I haven't been, and I haven't been outside of like a private lesson. I haven't been coaching high school kids in a while, and the landscape's all new for me. But just thinking about it as a bit of a third party, if the player has good leadership qualities, they're a good student, and there's upside from their work ethic and also their frame, and maybe some other intangibles that you've seen from playing against good competition, where you're saying, you know what, this is a kid I want in my locker room for the next couple of years. I think this kid, it is a sophomore, junior, will be better off than someone I picked up that's new. But a coach isn't saying that if kid's not a good student, or they're not playing a premier position, or they don't have the athleticism or versatility to kind of be a utility man, team guy. And Dwayne, I liked your point about being a part of a good organization, not because I know what you mean when you say that, because I'm familiar with the organizations that you're involved with, but not the, hey, they've got 85 teams and they've got the big facility and you could hit off of the X, Y, and Z, pitching machine, and they have this technology. Not for those reasons, but when you have a big competitive organization like that, you're probably not the best 2 or 3 players, just from the numbers standpoint. And if you stick around and you're playing with some good players and you want to be involved and you have some loyalty, and coaches can push on you a little bit, that experience is going to be good for you as the player for reasons we've already discussed. And if you respond well to that, like, word will travel. And then coaches might be willing to take a 17-year-old that they might not get something for right now, but they've been sold on the character and the makeup of what it could be. um,
Yeah,
where
I feel like those conversations about the travel baseball world is so similarly like it's so similar to what you would say to a high school kid that's getting recruited. Like ask questions and learn about the organization before you know. It's like talking to your high school kid that you think is going to play college baseball that you're trying to tell them, you know, maybe don't jump at that first offer, like make sure you know what you're getting into, like those kinds of things. I feel like it's a similar thing in regards to the travel program. But it's to your point, Kyle. It's also like the coaches in those organizations. That's why I just said what I said, is because it's about the coaches in those programs. I think about if you can learn a bit about the organization instead of just seeing the uniforms, seeing the tournaments that they go to, and seeing the amount of college commits that they have, like ask questions about the coaches that they have. Maybe try to get to learn about some of these coaches before you go and make your decision.
Tim, I'm
Yeah,
curious. You have a super unique perspective because you've coached at the highest level, and you've also been a parent around the same time that you were coaching at the highest level of a your son that was playing high school baseball, middle school, high school baseball growing up. Um, so not to tell the world, hey, this is what I did and you should all do it, but what was the approach that you took?
with my son.
Yeah.
Um, the approach I took early on with him was I didn't want dad and coach to be in the same house together, right? So I I really tried to separate being a father from being a coach, and it's not easy. Like by far the hardest thing you'll ever do is coach your own kid, because you're I don't know. There's just such a visceral tie to their success, or their work ethic, or whatever you think they should be doing. Um, so coaching him, he was the kid who loved baseball, but it's more he loved the idea of baseball than he loved actually getting out there and grinding. And he was just a funny kid. He wasn't your serious like go get him. And so that kind of probably helped me because I was like, all right, I don't want to be this asshole who's on him all the time. I want him to be himself. I want him to love the game for however he loves the game. And so I kind of separated myself a little bit from it. And then I go into pro ball, and like I said, he's in middle school, whatever. So I more or less just moved to the best high school in the area and passed him off to those guys, which, you know, ironically is kind of what my dad did to me too. And it would I do it the same? Probably not. Because in doing so, I also put him in the best talent pool in the area, which meant that he probably didn't get the reps. When he was kind of hitting that testosterone phase where he did start to get a little more serious, and he probably could have developed pretty quickly, he wasn't getting the reps. So, but I also just don't believe baseball is everything. So, if he had told me I want to change high schools and go play somewhere, I would have done it. But he liked the program. He liked that they were pushing for state championships every year, and he was a part of that, and he wanted to be there. And so I'm like, yeah, go do it. And it's kind of the same thing I tell all these kids. Like, if you want to get on the field, be undeniable, work harder. You've got. He ended up being like I said, I'm 5'7". Somehow he's like 6'1", and so he ended up having a bigger frame, left-handed hitting catcher, like ran pretty well. Like, you can do it, but you're gonna have to put in the reps, and I'm not there to say, hey buddy, let's go. So it was kind of up to him. And I think he enjoyed his high school career, but he probably did more fishing than he did hitting in the cage. And now he's in college and enjoying life and does not even ask to go hit. So there you go.
I like that you mentioned that it's so hard. Dwayne and I are not parents, but um, I can appreciate from the dads that I've become friends with when I work with their sons what their experience has been like, and then also even myself, where I'm so used to having a certain dialogue with players and other coaches, which are almost all of the people I surround myself with, and then that style bleeds into how I am with my brothers, and they don't play baseball. I'm not like coaching them on literally coaching them on that, but that sort of dynamic bleeds into the family, and it's just really no place for it there. I could just appreciate that, or I can try to appreciate that the whole father coach dynamic's tough. The best examples I've seen, what they all have in common is that and so your point, like they've been dad first, and they've tried to put their children in good environments with good people, and they're okay with letting them have some shortcomings as long as they have a good support system. But it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, I just think like you said, like seeing it at the highest level, it has to be theirs. It just does. Like those big leaguers who just to get and stay in the big leagues is so tough, and they can't be doing it for dad. They're not doing it for dad. Like you can't do that. You can't wake up and do that every single day and grind every single day and go fail and get back up and do it again for dad. Like, and if it wasn't his, like if it wasn't his internal motivation, then there's nothing I can do about that. And so at least that's my feeling on it. And uh, we have a good relationship. He lives with me now. He's going to junior college, same junior college I played baseball at. And he, like I said, I've got a brand new, big, nice facility with hit tracks where he can go have fun if he wants, but never asked to. So
I think that's an important thing you say there, is that you guys have a good relationship, and that does make me happy to hear, because I'm sure you've experienced like the other side of that, in regards to being involved with coaching your son, because I think everybody has seen examples of that. Again, myself and Kyle, not personally. Like Kyle, I don't think you said this explicitly, but I don't think your dad ever coached you. Maybe like Little League helped out now.
No.
Yeah, my dad never coached me either, so I didn't have personal experience, but you kind of witnessed secondhand what things could be, and it's just like, holy shit, I'm glad my dad's out in right field right now, just kind of hanging out with my mom watching me play.
well, like y'all can do this experiment on your own, but 47, been coaching. Like I said, I'm straight out of college, so I've been coaching 25 plus years, whatever. And this experiment holds up pretty well. Take a look at dad coaches and look at their sons and see how many of those sons go on to play 4 years of college baseball, no matter how good they are, versus the other kids on those teams that aren't the dad's sons, that might not be as good as the actual coach's son growing up. A lot of times it's the Dwaynes and the Kyles who are not the coach's kid, who might not have been as good as the coach's kid, who play 4 years of college baseball, where those coaches' kids at some point decide, man, I'm tired of baseball. I'm tired of doing this, because you can't leave it. Like it's not I don't leave it at the field. I go home, and while mom's cooking dinner, dad's telling me everything that I did wrong. I that I saw that, I believe that, and that's one of the reasons I really tried to separate myself for my kid. And again, he's not playing either, so maybe I didn't do a very good job of it. I don't know.
Have you seen the hat thing that guys talk about? Because I've seen it on social media. So there was a guy who talked about what it's like coaching his kid, and he said that when he's in the car and his hat's on a certain way, or if the kid's hat is on a certain way or on at all, he'll want to talk about baseball. If it's off, he doesn't want to talk about it. Like that's kind of like a rule that they had set, where if the kid's in the car and his hat's off, he doesn't want to talk about it, and then it's just, the guy's in dad mode. And then, if the kid's hat is on after the game, that means he wants to talk about with whatever happened. And, the dad could kind of get into that coach mode and talk to him about what might have happened during the game. Is that something you think like is good? Because again,
I like that. Yeah, I really do. I kind of wish I'd had that with my kid, because, again, he was a fun kid who was kind of silly, but like he was well, how would you call it? Like he was just kind of an emotional kid. I don't know. And so like I had a hard time probably knowing when he wanted to talk and when he didn't want to talk. And that would have been a nice tool to have as a dad, probably.
I want to go back to something you said before, where basically your point was like for someone to get to the big leagues or to get to pro ball or to get to college or even to start on a high school team, like excluding talent, like it has to be theirs. It has to be their internal intrinsic motivation. How do you, from a coach, parent, whatever, how do you curate that? Where do you think that comes from?
I think Dwayne said it earlier is like you have to have a foundation of fun, um, a foundation of like I want to go to the park. I want to go play catch. I want to go to the cages. I want to go lift. I want to do. I want to find these things enjoyable. And if that's your foundation, and that could be because you're, you know, intrinsically motivated as a little kid. But if you're not, how do we curate that as coaches, right? How do we make sure that they're not leaving feeling too beat up, too beating themselves up, making sure that they feel almost kind of gamify things to a degree where, have some competitions, whatever it is. Um, and then maybe I'm a big believer of like, you're going to know somewhere around 14 or 15 when that testosterone kicks in, if this is what they really want to do or not. But if you can keep them, grinding and coming in and having a good time up until that point, then we've got a really good foundation and we can go, okay, now you've got some tools to go with this. Now here's the next step. But if you don't, if it's, this once a week, 30-minute lesson with a guy who's yelling at you the whole time, like, again, I'd go play football or basketball or something else too.
I'm reminded of a phrase, I don't remember where it originates from, but it's around the gym or strength conditioning. It's like just a old telltale sign of like always leave wanting to come back
Yeah.
in terms of how hard you're training and how sore you are and whatever.
Yeah. What was his name? And maybe somebody different than you, Mike Rutherford, or something like that. There's a big time strength coach and was older, was in his 50s and was still jacked. And that was his thing, was like, leave something in the tank. Cause I was bad. I'm still bad about that. I trashed myself and then I can't work out for a couple of days. I got a bum shoulder right now because of it. Um, and so I got try to remind myself that when, I don't have to be laying in a puddle of my own sweat and puke to know that I had a good workout.
Yeah, because that's the whole the working's done when you can't work anymore
Hmm.
type of mentality. So I'm curious, like how because you mentioned a dynamic that myself and the other coaches over at St. Joe's, and even when I was coaching high school baseball, that we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but how you balance the whole taking a pulse of what the team needs, whether that's a little bit of fun or do we need to take 50 plus PFP reps and then grind the shit out of some first and third, some bunt defense until they get it right, until it's right, like the old school. We're gonna run bunt defense until this looks good 20 times in a row and there's no drops, and you like, how do you balance that whole dynamic? Because it is tough. When you talk about the span of a season, you don't want to completely lose guys' interest. And it works when everybody kind of buys in. And like I say all the time, winning sort of cures everything. When you're winning, it's easy to say like, okay, we got to do this because we're winning. This is why we win. But sometimes it's not like that. So how do you kind of balance the whole, all right, maybe today we do something a little bit fun. Maybe today we not take it easy, because again, you got a certain amount of hours to get some work done. You don't want to be wasting their time and your time. So how do you balance that whole dynamic?
Um, Again, I've heard you guys talk with with Taylor about like reading energy and momentum and these types of things that are kind of hard to or maybe even possible to weigh and measure. So uh, front office people don't want to act like they exist, but they do, right? And so like you can, from a team standpoint, like I've been a hitting coach, and so I'm more dealing with the individual. And even now in the private space, I'm still more dealing with individuals than the team. So I'm having to go back a little bit since the last time I was the head of a actual team. But I still feel like even then you can kind of read the energy of the group and be like, okay, they're working hard, but they're failing. So maybe we need to back off. Okay, they're not working hard and failing. Maybe I need to put my foot down a little bit and make sure that they're focused. Um, okay, they're not working hard and we're playing great. Maybe I just back the hell up and let them keep doing what they're doing. We'll ride that wave. But I see that that wave's going to crest at some point. At that point, I'm ready to put my foot down again. Um, some coach, I don't know, baseball or whatever, talked about like making a shit and whipped cream bowl for, and sometimes you just got to mix some shit in there. And then sometimes there's too much shit. We got to put some whipped cream in there. And it's like, it's what the metaphor that's always in my head when I think about that with a team or even an individual. Like you can see when somebody's grinding on themselves too hard, or in their own head versus somebody who's just, jacking around and not really focused. And you just kind of steer the ship wherever you got to steer it.
Tim, how does that change from the exact spectrum that you're referring to right now? What is that like in a high school-ish range player in a minor league setting, and then different, if at all, in the big league setting?
The biggest difference, I think Taylor hit on this a little bit in that podcast as well. The biggest difference is in the big leagues, there's a lot. There's a lot. One, you're trying to win every night, so it's not so much about development. Where for me, at least as a high school coach, I wanted to win every night, but I was still very conscious of the development aspect. And then in the minor leagues, for me, it was pretty much all development. And, so like there's a little nuance there, but again, it comes down to like conversations and like let's just say the big leagues, if you see somebody's starting to get in their own head, like we got a game to play that night. So it's definitely time to like back up, talk, have a conversation, figure out like what is the tool that you feel like you have right now that we can go battle with. Like I'm not worried about being perfect. I'm not worried about like making that tool better right now because we have to go win a game. So like how do we take that? Okay, I can't pull a pitch. Okay. So maybe we need to change our approach. Maybe we need to look more. I know we're talking, whatever, middle in, hunt something, whatever. But for you tonight, maybe we need to look a little more middle away. Maybe he'll make a mistake, whatever. And, whatever. Like, but how do we do that and try to make them feel confident stepping into that box? That's by far the most important thing. I think with a high school or even a minor leaguer, my approach was always, who do you want to be? Like, who do you want to be in the future? Like, what's holding you back, and how can we work on that consistently while still being able to battle with who you are right now, so that we keep that confidence and that momentum and all that. So that was kind of, and honestly, that was even my approach in the big leagues, but it was just more, confidence is just such a big deal up there. Like you got to feel like you're better than that guy across from you. And if that starts to wane at all, it's going to be trouble. So, but it's ultimately like, if you were to ask me, like, I would say that's always my approach. Like, all right, let's pull all the data together and find out what hold you have. How are you going to get exposed? Why, what's going on in your swing or in your approach that's allowing that hole to get exposed? How can we build a plan to mitigate that? And then how can we, by working up close to the game, by game time, how can we make you feel confident against the guy you're going to face tonight? Like that's pretty much the roadmap that I've always used.
That's such a good point, that I think those that aren't super familiar with the pro setting might not, I guess, just might not be obvious to them that it doesn't have to be an in-season, off-season, like now I have to perform during these months, and during these months I can work on stuff. And in the pro setting, and it sounds like similar in the big leagues, just maybe with a different titration, you're spending earlier parts of the day like further away from the game, attacking the things that they have to get better at. Because even at the big league level, I haven't been there, but from everyone that's coached that level will say you're still developing. You have to get better. Even if you're already pretty good, if you stay with what you've got, at some point the league will adjust, and good luck.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
away
no,
from, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, I'm real upfront with all my guys, and you guys talked about another one. Like, everything's about building relationships, and how quickly you can do that. And once you have that relationship and you have that trust, then it's like I'm pretty upfront. Like, hey, if you're hot and you're riding that wave, I'm going to leave you alone. I'm not going to say shit. I'm going to flip the baseball. I'm going to put it on a tee. I'm going to ask you what you want, mixed pitch BP machine, whatever. Uh, and I'm going to let you keep riding that wave. At the same time, I'm doing my homework every night and every morning to see if something seems a little bit off, so that once you start to fall, we can catch the next wave quickly and not have to sit there and wait a long time. And that's definitely the big leagues. Like, I'm not putting my foot down. You're not telling somebody who makes a lot more money than you do and has a lot of experience or whatever, hey man, you need to get better at hitting, back foot sliders. But you pretty much can ask them, like, hey, what do you think you need to work on? Man, I get exposed on, anything that's running into me. Okay, cool. How do you want to work on that? Oh, that sounds good. Great. Let's stick to that this year, whatever. So it's like you can continue to develop. It's not that hard. I actually think at my couple years in the big leagues, if it taught me one thing, it was I feel like more harm than good happens in the off season when they do try to make changes, because you can't make change you can't simulate big league pitching. There's nowhere in the world to simulate it. So you're making change with the idea off of some sort of metric that you're making positive change, and you're getting these false positives. Then you get into spring training and you see real big league pitching, and you're like, oh shit. And now you've developed a new movement pattern that you've got to fix, because you developed this movement pattern that doesn't work. It works in a vacuum, but it doesn't work over here against these guys who are so elite that, like, just look at your typical 4A guys who crush AAA and can't hit in the big leagues. The difference between the big league pitching and anything else in the world is like, I don't know, like difference between a like best D1 college and your freaking middle of the road JV high school. Like, there's not even close.
Can you talk about what the difference is? Like, you just hit on the disparity between the two, but there are guys in Double A that throw 100. There are guys in Low A that have a slider that moves 23 inches. So it's not the stuff exists
Mm-hmm.
in the minor leagues, but like, so what does that difference look like?
I would say, like, and when I was with Corpus Christi, when I was in Double A, I mean, we had Christian Javier, we had Framber was there for a minute. Like, we had like all these guys that are now with the Astros, like they're best guys, Abreu, all that. The difference is they're still working on stuff. They're not as consistent. You might see, we were piggybacking back then. So like, you're going to see them a couple times, and then you're going to see somebody else who's probably not as good or whatever. In the big leagues now, everybody coming out of the pen is so good that, like, you better be able to get to the starter, the guy that you actually have pretty good homework on. And if he can go 3 times through the lineup, and then you get in the bullpen, or even 2, and they just every inning they're bringing in the nastiest stuff you've seen. It's like, it's not what it was, where, if you were facing Roger Clemens, you just wanted to get him out so you could get to the bullpen and try to win the game. It's almost the opposite these days. It never stops. That's the difference. And they're good. They know where your hole is, and they make very few mistakes. I still work with about 5 big leaguers, and I'll get up and I'll look at their stuff and I'll message them, hey man, you got nothing to hit. Like, they literally just stayed on the black the whole game, and they're staying on the black with 97 with run. They're not. It's not like they're staying on the black with something easy.
I think that's a really good point. And I mean, listen, you made a lot of incredible points about the hitting side of things in regards to developing stuff that we could probably spend freaking 4+ hours talking about. That I think that stuff is so important. But that last point is like an approach. You talked about like approach versus making, mechanical, physical adjustments, because obviously you're always still trying to develop those things. But when the attention, it sounds like you do a really good job of bringing the attention of the player to important aspects that they're maybe not thinking about. Because I know at me as a player, whenever I wasn't hitting well, it was like, what am I doing wrong with my swing? What am I doing wrong with my swing? And it made me, want to change things. Whereas to your point there at the end, you're just not getting anything to hit, or maybe you think your perception is you're good at hitting pitch A, but meanwhile your swing isn't good to that pitch. You just maybe been getting away with something. Maybe it was lesser pitching and you're getting to this inside pitch, whereas you actually should be trying to stay middle away and driving the ball in that regard. And the reason why I bring that up is because for us lately, it's been a lot of conversations like that too in regards to approach. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because when you inform the player of things like, dude, you keep swinging at this high fastball. I don't think I've ever seen you put it in play competitively. Like, how about maybe we just don't swing at it? Because the second you kind of expose yourself on that pitch, it's a borderline strike. It might be a strike, it might not be. The second you expose yourself on that, or dump your ass out and swing at a breaking ball in the dirt, now the guy's just like, oh, I could just do that to him. If you're more patient, a lot of these guys don't know where their zone is. They don't know where they should be. And I'm talking about, dealing with Division III hitters versus obviously dealing with big league guys. But, I wouldn't know because I've never worked with big league hitters. I've never worked with any professional hitters or anything like that. But, these guys have an idea of what they're doing at our level. And they're smart and they care and they want to be there and but it's always swing oriented. They always are talking about their swing. And I feel like the last couple weeks it's been, this is where you're good. Like, let's hunt this. Instead of, you tend to swing at this pitch a lot, but, you don't hit it competitively, essentially. And yes, and we do talk about similar points that you brought up. Like, yes, we're going to develop that. We're going to try to get better at that. At maybe hitting, because a lot of guys struggle with the inside fastball because they don't get to it well. They don't backspin the inside pitch well. That's just something that I've noticed coaching at this level the last couple of years is guys at our level don't really backspin inside pitches. They'll pull a middle pitch and then be like, okay, I hit inside pitch as well. Meanwhile, they're not actually hitting an inside fastball. You know what I'm saying? Like, they'll pull that breaking ball that's starting middle in and breaking away. They'll pull that fastball that's middle away and then think that they're a pull hitter. Meanwhile, that's just the way their swing's working. And then you look at I call pitches too, myself and our pitching coach. We call pitches. I think that we do a good job of that. And it's, you're watching these guys' swings in BP. You're looking at their spray chart, and it's like, this guy pulls the ball, but I have to think from the information that I've gathered that he's pulling middle away pitches, and then we're throwing them inside and they can't get to it. They're getting jammed up, everything. So it's, just to wrap it around, like, what is it that made you notice those things in regards to approach, and how important do you think the whole approach side of the hitting is for our players? Because I think when we talk about hitting nowadays, it's all about making these quote unquote high level patterns with your swing, whatever the hell you want to call it. It's all about getting the specific launch angle, the specific exit velocity, being able to do this. And it happens, I love that you brought this up too, in the controlled environment versus what's happening competitively. Like, in regards to approach, like, how was it that you came to this conclusion of this balance of development of the swing, development of certain pitches, and approach?
I, we haven't really talked about my introduction into pro ball, but I was, again, very, very lucky. I get hired by the Astros, and at the time, the Astros were probably the leader in the clubhouse. Everybody's chasing them as far as technology and access to data and all that. And, I'm this 40-year-old guy who's like trying to understand, X, Y, and Z vectors and like looking at these charts and trying to figure out how they make sense to the swing. And I was brought in with a guy named Jeremy Barnes, who's now the hitting coach for the Mets. And I was also hired the same year with a guy named Jason Kanzler, who is now the farm director for the Cubs. And these are two of the brighter minds in baseball, in my opinion. And they did not agree on just about anything. So I got to live in the world between these two guys and learn from both of them. And I also had, a farm director and a GM who were very uh, big at the time on kind of this idea of meritocracy and the best ideas rise to the top and blah, blah, blah. So it was just like this great place to learn and get better. And when you're in the big leagues or even in, professional baseball, at least with the Astros at the time and everywhere else now, pretty much, you have access to so much data, like biomechanical data, bat tracking data, um, in-game, uh, batted ball, whatever. So it's not hard to put together a plan, or not necessarily a plan, but not hard to find out why somebody's struggling. Like you just be like, all right, they don't hit here. They're being pitched like this. Their bat in space is doing this. Okay, why is the bat in space doing that? Okay, biomechanically, they're doing this, blah, blah, blah. And we build this thing, right? And so then the question is just like, then you get into like change theory, like, right? When do you change? When do you make a change? When do you intervene in a system? That whole thing. And that's the bigger question. Like, really, the bigger question is not, do you need to change? It's like, when and how do we go about it? So anyhow, backing all that up, again, like if you want people, so the Astros were very much like change aggressive. Like they were at the time, they were very much like, there's an issue, we see it, go fix it. And they didn't care if that affected the person's brain in the box that night. And so it was some trial and error. And then like Kanzler was very much kind of player centric. I feel like I kind of am as well. And so we had a lot of conversations around like, how do we do this? And at the same time, value the human in front of us and allow them to go have success. And so at that point, like now you're talking about, again, like I think of it like a tool or a weapon, right? What do I have that I'm taking into the box that night? And if it can't handle this, then what should my approach be to give myself the best chance to go battle against that shape, that pitch shape, whatever those pitch shapes are. And this goes back to what you asked Kyle earlier too, is like everybody now, all these big league pitchers now, they all go north, south, and east, west. Used to be they just went north, south.
That's the hardest thing.
You could figure something out. You could be like, all right, we'll just eliminate the top or we'll eliminate the bottom, whatever. But now they do all of it. And it's like, it's like you almost like your approach has to be sit middle. Like it's really the only thing you can do because everything is give yourself a chance. Because if you try to eliminate a zone, those guys are just so good. But sorry, back to the original question. And I think it just once I got my brain around this idea of like who do you want to be? Let's work on that. How can we battle with who you are today? That allowed me to start having better conversations, developing better individualized approaches. More buy-in on development because again, these guys are scared they're going to get cut. They're scared they're going to get set back down to AAA. They're scared, whatever. So it's like getting them to work on something they're not good at is not always the easiest thing. And in the minor leagues, it's tough because, well, let's say they got a 900 OPS in AA. Well, they just want to get bumped up to AAA. They don't want to work on what they're not good at. So it's like getting them to understand, like a lot of times it's those 4A guys that finally get the light bulb moment. They're like, oh shit, if I want to stay up here, I've got to address this. But you're hopeful that you're in an organization that does a good job with development and you can catch those guys a little earlier. But again, you're talking about college going and competing each night. Yeah. It sounds
Tim,
like
I want to ask you something quick. When you ask the player, who do you want to be? And this probably the answer might change depending on age and level and all of that. But how often when you ask the player, who do you want to be, is there answer something that you think they're capable of. Meaning, so for example, if you're 6'3", 255, and you hit the ball really hard and whatever, and they say to you, I'm giving an absurd example. They say to you, I want to be Billy Hamilton. Then like, okay, not even close. So just to give context, what I'm asking, how often is what they say they want to be just not playing into their strengths or what you think that they are physically capable of?
It's kind of rare, but the example you gave is pretty funny because I do know of a probably future Hall of Famer who kind of fits the mold that you just talked about, who wants to be Luis Arias. And I'm like, what? Like, no. We're going to focus on OPS. We're going to stick with that because that's what you're really good at. We want to maximize that. So it does happen. But when it does happen, it's kind of like, again, you just sit down, you just lay it out in front of them and be like, here's who you are. Here's what you do well. How can we maximize that? And then like with some people, it's not even as much about maximizing. It's about like, can we be more consistent? Like, how can we be more consistent doing what we do well? How can we maximize that superpower, be more consistent with that superpower or whatever? Okay, let's say you want to work on like your end zone miss may be a little high, right? Like, whatever. So we want to bring that down. Well, how can we bring that end zone miss down a tick without sacrificing some of the damage you're doing? Like, and trying to build a plan around that. It's just so much of it's just asking the human, how do they want to go about it? And then like most time they'll give you the right answer.
That's so important for buy-in. Just that concept of like telling the player first, starting with the positive, this is what you're good at. Like, you're here. I don't know if you realize this, but this is how the scale works. This is what we compare you to, whatever it is. You're here right now. That's really good, dude. And like, sometimes they're like, whoa. And sometimes they're like, yeah, no. You tell them that, you're like, listen, that needs to stay there. Like, that's why you're here. I think you get better at it. Or like you said, when it's good, it's good. Let's make it good more often. And then we talk about this is what's holding you back right now. Is that something that we can improve, or at least improve in terms of, like, let's say if it's swing and miss, is that something we can improve mechanically where you just hit the ball more often? Or maybe it's a certain part of the zone that you just can't hit, so maybe let's just swing at it less, kind of to Dwayne's point earlier. So it's maybe not a change, it's just a strategy shift. But then when you come at it from that place, then everyone's like, okay, yeah, let's do that. And now they're excited to do the thing that maybe they've hated.
Yeah, this was something that Jason Kanzo and I talked about a lot, which is like, if you tell somebody, okay, hey, you've got this flaw, you need to fix that flaw from the day they walk into your organization, and that's all you hammer, and they go out and they don't have success, now they blame you or the organization for their lack of success. Versus if you lay this out and you say, hey, how do you want to go about this? Is this something you want to do? And they own it. Now they have to own their success or their failure as well. And it's much less butting of heads as they work their way through the organization. I feel like, again, that was one of the things that I felt like we made a positive move while I was with the Astros towards something more like that versus day one. It was very clinical. It's like, we see a cancer, we're going to cut that cancer out. And if you don't make it to, AA, sorry, it was really good in a lot of ways, but that was something I felt like we made a good adjustment on.
Yeah, balance is so important. Of like, you have to be firm and realistic with what needs to improve, but then there's an array of ways you can go about it. It's a completely different response.
I think to both of your guys' points though, when there's the this is what you're good at, I feel like leading with things like that makes it more of like a team effort as opposed to this is what you're doing wrong, you got to fix this. It kind of gives the tone that this is why you're here. You're here because you're good at this, and maybe because you have your attention now on what you're not doing well. It kind of loses the identity. It helps lose confidence. Like, it is important, obviously, because, you guys are talking about getting guys to play at the highest level possible, which obviously these guys do need to make their adjustments, but there's a reason why that they're at the level that they're at. They're obviously very good at something. So, you can call it, an ego stroke or whatever you want to call it, but I think that sometimes guys do need that a little bit. You got to stoke their fires a little bit and sort of remind them that they are, exceptionally good at what it is that they're doing, because I I laugh, because obviously we're a couple months or maybe like a month or so into the big league season, and you hear the fans of this guy stinks, and I just laugh my ass off. I'm like, dude, these are freaking big leaguers we're talking about.
They're so
They
good.
don't, yeah, they're so good. Like, and it's the comparison, because again, I don't have experience at the big league level. I don't have experience at any professional level. When you talked about, big league pitching to AAA is like, Division One to JV baseball that's fucking insane. Like that
It's
is
all you gotta do is look at the numbers. I mean, go, just pick your favorite 4A guy who kind of gets to go up and down, and look at what they do in AAA, and then look at what they do in the big leagues, and
it's insane.
It's night and day. I mean, you're talking like 400 with 4 tanks already versus 0, 0, 0.
Yeah, and again, I see it from my level, and I see it from the private sector where you're working with kids. You see these exceptionally talented ball players, and then I hear stories from Kyle, people like yourself, and other guys who work professionally, talking about going to work with some of these guys, and it's like, then you listen to the fan that's, in my experience too, I played Division II and Division III baseball, and I saw some really good baseball players. And even coaching high school, you see some kids that end up being Division I players, getting drafted and stuff. And then you can only, for myself, I can only imagine what it's like to watch on a regular basis, watch some of these guys go to work, and then you hear a fan say, "Oh, this guy sucks," and I'm like, Jesus Christ, like
Yeah,
this guy.
I'm a very big I'm very very player centric. Like
Yeah,
I to the point where like I can't handle any of that kind of stuff. I pretty much don't watch games. I don't want to hear what commentators have to say. Like when you're there in the trenches with those guys every day, and you know how good they are, you see how hard they work. Like I don't have very much patience for that kind of stuff. But it's probably one of the reasons like uh I kind of somewhat I don't maybe the reason I'm not in pro ball right now. Like I think like part of staying in that world is you somewhat need to join the club, and I just wasn't good at that. I wanted to just be in there working with the guys, and uh, you know, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go hang out much a game with other coaches and stuff like that. So probably one of my biggest flaws.
Well, that's one I share with you.
I think we share. I think we share quite a bit. Yeah.
I
yeah,
think, yeah, we never talked about that, but that's something that I think the two of us connected with subliminally for a
Yeah.
while. It's just like, it's more interesting talking about why you're doing a certain type of cardio training, or like this new way to help you sleep better, or, what's going on with, um, the house you're building, or like things like that are more interesting. They seem more real than, oh, did you see what so and so did in Double A last night? Like, no, no idea. I have no clue. I have
Nope.
14 hitters right now, and I'm not spending as much time on
No.
them as I feel like I need to, and I don't care what someone else is doing at another level. Which, I mean, yeah, I said that out loud. You're probably not supposed to, but
Well, it's like I mean that's why we have like reporting systems. Like I can go look later. You know what I mean? Like once he gets brought up to me, I will go do my homework on him, and then at that point, I will do the best I can. And when he gets off to the next level, I will root for him. But I'm definitely not doing my homework on him. He's got another coach to do that. So
yeah,
yeah,
that's a good point. So there's a couple, like in my situation right now, I'm in low A. There's a couple guys in extended at the complex that there's two or three that would probably come to us. One or two that are coming off injury at some point, and they'll come back up. And then a couple others that are sort of next, like on deck to be moved up. So I'm following them, and not there. I didn't say like, oh, he hit a double last night, great, but I'll pay attention to what the coaches are doing with them. It's like have them on a radar. Yeah, like so and so working with them, and now they're a level or two above. Like you're rooting for them when they do well. I'm genuinely excited and happy, but I'm not losing sleep over if
Nope.
they swung at a 2-1 slider or not.
Yep. Nope. 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 Yeah. I mean, I think there's different personalities that get into this game for different reasons, and doesn't mean they're not really good coaches. I think it was Taylor again. Y'all were talking about like leadership and like I think he was talking about Jordan Peterson and about like those personality types of these leaders who are great leaders, but they're not great people. I see a lot of that in professional baseball. But I think the there's just different ways to lead. I think those people are typically more charismatic. I'm not a charismatic. I'm more like I'm not going to show any emotion, so you can come anchor yourself to me if you're feeling emotional. That's my personality. And it just took me a long time to not try to be anybody else and to just be me and learn how to lead that way. Um, but I think there are those people, and they never really understood me. There's a lot of people in professional baseball coaches who are genuinely still fans, and I'm not. So they're like, they just looked at me side eyed, like, "What? Who's this weird guy who lives in his van that they're letting work with our hitters?"
Yeah, that's relatable as hell, dude. In regards to maybe not in living in the van, but the idea of being who you are as a coach, especially in this freaking Instagram day and age where everybody's a motivational speaker, everybody's an Instagram influencer, everybody, you have to be this certain way. Like, you can definitely be influenced, especially as a younger coach, to be a certain way. So, freaking all the props to you in the world for at the level that you have been at to, embrace being yourself. I'm sure that wasn't the easiest thing in the world. And like you've kind of alluded to and said, received some criticism for. So, but, me, myself, being somebody who likes to be in the trenches, like you said, and I've always been a very process oriented guy. I think that's why, I love the monotony of what we do. Like, if people ask me what I miss the most, it's shit like, going and catching bullpens and talking about what the pitches look like and showing up early, doing early work with the other catchers because we don't, see a lot of BP time during practice. It's stuff like that. That's the stuff that I miss the most as a player. And it's the shit that I love to do every single day. Like people always talk to like my buddies, because you know how it is, I'm sure. A lot of my friends that I played college ball with, they're all doing a million different things. But when we all meet up and they're just like, dude, so it's just the same thing every day. I'm like, yeah, I fucking love it. Like it's great.
It is, but it's not because the problem changes every day. Like when you have
Yeah.
a person in front of you that's 14 guys in front of you that have all had a different experience for the last couple of weeks, stuff going on differently at home or they all slept differently. Some are performing well, some aren't. And you show up and you might have some practice plan and you walk in the door and something's different, whether it's the environment or the people. So it's um, that's the part that I fall in love with is that with the players. And Tim, I've seen it from you, but then you've also just said it where like that's the concern. That's the part that we really like. It's less about did you see so and so hit for the cycle for some other team that none of us play for? Like
Mm-hmm.
no, no, not at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what you said, Dwayne, about like loving the process, I think like I don't have any like amazing skill or what would you call it, even like background. Like I have a bachelor's in kinesiology from 20 years ago. Um, what I think allowed me to be ready for coaching professionally when the call came was that I always focused on figuring out the problems in front of me at the time. And when you do that consistently on a daily basis, you just develop a pretty big skill set um, that's somewhat actionable because you've seen that problem, you've figured out that problem, and now you can move on to the next one, and you do day after day after day after day, and then all of a sudden people start asking you questions about hitting or whatever, and it's like, yeah, I've seen that, or I've been there, I've done that, I've attacked it this way and had success, or blah blah blah. And I think if I was talking to a young coach, like, yeah, you can go train at some facility or go learn from Teacher Man or Joey Cunha or whatever you want to do, but just really focus on the problems in front of you and figure out a way to solve them, and you will develop the skills you need to help. And that might be from a communication standpoint, that might be from an actual technical standpoint, whatever it is. So yeah, I think as cliche as it is, like, just really zone in on what you're doing every day, and you'll get there.
Yeah, the experience and doing, I guess, kind of what you're talking about, like doing the work kind of does expose a lot of, it answers a lot of questions, so to speak. I've always found that when I'm training guys individually in a private setting, while I'm coaching, like right now, like today I'm going to go to practice, and then later tonight I'm going to go to the facility and train some athletes. And I find that that benefits me because you're seeing what's working and you're seeing what isn't. And again, no two guys are exactly the same, but it keeps in the back of my mind where the focus needs to be, because, you talked about this earlier with that controlled setting and controlled results, is how can I make, because it's impossible, obviously, but how can I bring attention to what we need to develop physically with the swing, or catching, because I do train catchers as well, and what is it that I'm going to help, how is it that I'm going to help you prepare to play in your game this week, or play in a tournament this weekend, or things like that. So I think for me, a lot of times I allow I try to help the kid create ownership for what it is they're doing. I like to ask a lot of questions about what it is that's happening to them in their at bats, or what's happening to them in a practice setting or a tryout setting or whatever, you name it, so that we can sort of together create the approach for that lesson. We can attack it together in a way that's effective in regards to their development, but also, I love how you phrased it earlier. I might, get it a little bit wrong, but you're developing things, but you're also, going to battle with things that that you can compete with on that day. So I do think that that's super beneficial, being able to coach and train at the same time. I think a lot of times that, I've definitely fallen victim to this as well. Training guys during the winter, and it's like, oh, damn, we just rolled through some T drills, some flips, some BP, and you look awesome, dude. You're freaking good to go. But then, their first couple of weeks of live at bats, it's like, yeah, I just punched out like 4 times, and it's like, all right, shit. Well,
Yeah,
we need.
the hard part with that is, like, I get guys who send me video and they're like, hitting 110 on TrackMan, and they're like real happy, and I'm like, you don't want to mess their confidence up. So I'm like, yeah, it looks great, dude. But in the back of my mind, I'm going, I'm not sure that's going to play.
Yeah.
What are
I
some,
mean,
so, uh, can you explain what that looks like or what that is? So, how could someone, I'm asking for parent or amateur player, whatever, how can someone hit a ball 110 off of a fastball machine or something in practice? Obviously, a very good player, and you could look at it and say it won't play. Like, what wouldn't play? Like, what might that be?
Well, I mean, you're asking a really specific one, which my
It
hesit
doesn't have to be specific to that example, just
well,
in
I'll
general.
just use that one because it's specific, but you can get the general idea. Again, you're getting a fastball. It's in the middle. You can sell out and have bigger movements than you're going to be able to have in a game. You can have a longer swing arc. You can have more head movement. You can have your center of mass can move forward more. You can take advantage of that forward momentum and a bigger, longer swing arc, and create higher exit velos, a la some of the biggest training programs that there are out there right now, and create a habit, like a movement habit, that you're going to have to fix once you have to learn how to rotate in a phone booth again. So that would be that specific example. And it's one I've seen a lot. These guys going off and chasing exit velos in the off season and then having the worst year of their career the next year. So I would chase efficiency, which is hard, but that's what I would chase if I was going into the off season, especially because these guys all have the engines. Like I'm not talking about a 17-year-old Dominican who's skinny. I'm talking about men.
Right. Where that player's chasing hitting balls 110, but they're doing so in a way that is what you just described. Whereas what I don't think you're saying is that hitting a ball 110 is bad or guys that can do it can't hit. It's just, I know you didn't mean that, but just so that the world hears it right.
Yeah.
Whereas if you, like you said, rotate in a phone booth, you're more efficient. You can hit pitching. Guys throwing almost 100, you square a ball up, and you've got the engine. There comes your 108, 112.
100%. Yeah. I'm not saying Ellie's bad because he hits the ball 115 miles an hour. No, like he's doing that in a game against big league pitching, whatever. That's amazing. I'm talking about off-season changes that happen because guys they don't couple their behaviors, right? So like I'm just trying to hit a ball as hard as I can, right? And I don't couple that with something else like angles that will not allow me to sell out with my forward move, something like that, right? Like some way to constrain yourself from doing that thing in a way that won't work. And even with the proper constraints and proper mindset, you could still fall into some false positives for sure in the off season. But just like if we're going to keep it as simple as possible, a lot of people do go just chase exit velo because they think more exit velo or more bat speed is better. And in a vacuum, maybe it is. Like if everything else stays equal, the problem is everything else doesn't stay equal. Like you end up changing something else for that, and when you do that, maybe that's what you need. Maybe if you're going to go from AAA to be an everyday big leaguer, you just don't have enough pop. But honestly, what I've seen more than that is efficiency issues, not necessarily engine issues. The engine, at least at the big league, high level, the engines are mostly there. It's more about consistency, adjustability, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I love that you explain it that way because I think if you're someone who's just going through social media, and not someone who just looks at highlights and says, "Oh, he hit the ball 115, I should do that," but someone who's looking through and they're seeing the arguments and the mortars launched from side to side, where someone's saying, "Listen, if you want to play in the SEC, if you want to hit in the big leagues, you need this exit velocity," and then you have someone else that's saying, "That's terrible. Just knob to the ball, throw your hands at it, make contact, you'll hit 330." And then you have someone else who says, it doesn't matter, just train really hard, and they're barely practicing hitting. And it's like this whole battle. But really, if you take the approach that you just laid out, I hope people can realize just how silly that whole argument is. If you're focusing on the things you just mentioned.
Yeah, because like most of those, like again, I if I had time to be an internet troll, I probably could do a pretty decent job. I would just pull up people's data, like you say this, okay, let's look, and then I pull up the data and be like, here you go. He actually can't cover the top of the zone, but he's 6'8", so he doesn't have to cover the top of the zone. So who cares? There's just there's so much silliness, but the silliness is what gets people to click, and it's what makes these people money. So whatever. If you want to keep doing that, all more power to you. I just realized that like when I was interviewing for all these jobs, I get asked the same questions, and one that I consistently come back to that maybe people want to hear, maybe they don't, is, in my opinion, the only absolute is there's absolutely no absolutes. Like there are strategies, and we have to perform certain principles and concepts that are pretty universal and global. And then there are a litany of methodologies that will get you there. There are different strategies. There's different body types. that can incorporate different strategies better than other ones. And like that's hitting. Like, and if you want to sit there and act like you have the one system that works, then you're gonna make a lot more money than me. I know that, but I'm not gonna, because I can't sell individuality.
I guess that's like the curse of what we do. It's the sell your soul and sell out, I guess, so to speak, and or it's sort of buy into what it is that you're talking about, which I think I go back. You're talking about these arguments, Kyle, and Tim just kind of highlighting that some people sell out to selling this one way, swing this one way, and all will be cured. And I'm thinking about, again, like the travel baseball parent, and how the hell how are you not attracted to that? How are you not attracted to somebody who is swinging a certain way and doing everything possible, like online lessons with a 14-year-old kid where he's, going to this, hitting guru, and if he just does every drill and every movement pattern that this guy says, then, he's going to be a freaking Division I SEC guy or a draft pick or something like that. How is it that these people can even, I guess, differentiate a good or bad approach to hitting? They don't know anything. I've talked to parents who have no athletic experience whatsoever. I've talked to parents who, have even been experienced in baseball. They've played either college baseball, 20 or 30 years ago, or they, even guys that have coached, and they don't know what the hell to do, but then they, hear this guy who's trained this pro dude, and this is the one way to swing. Like, what is it that these people should be doing? How is it that they even do their homework on these people?
I would, my best advice would be to work backward from the game. Is your kid hitting? Right? Like, can they drive a baseball, in games, right? So if so, then like be very cautious to intervene in that, right? Like maybe you go to a hitting coach and say, hey, what do you see, and blah blah blah, and like maybe kind of get some idea on what they need to get better at. But then, like, let's say you're hitting in a game, then I would just say, go into a rent a batting cage, get some foam balls or something, where you're not gonna blow a kid up. Give them an age appropriate bat that's not too hot, and move the machine around, move it up, move it down, move it in, move it away, like change a couple angles and see, is there just a giant hole? Because there probably is. And you find that giant hole, then find somebody who can help you eliminate that. That's the most simple way I could put it, because like all these different arguments are valid for certain people. Like learning how to lead leg brace and using a slide board is valid for a lot of people. Learning how to hold your hip hinge and apply force when you want is valid for most people. It's just a lot of these systems are so rigid that I don't think they're valid for everybody. And so it's like, I don't know, if you could talk to somebody and they seem to have some nuance in what they're saying, then I'd go that way. But that's my personality. If somebody tends to have an ideological approach to something, my gut makes me go, let me show you how I can prove you wrong real quickly. So that's me. But like if I'm a parent and if it matches, fine. But I see this one kid who trains at my place right now, his dad's paid a ton of money to send him all over the country to train with these gurus. And what this kid needs to do is stand on his head or put his feet together or just quit thinking, because he's a pretty good athlete, but he's up there tying himself into a pretzel in his stance, trying to hit like every guru that he's gone to. And it's just hurting the kid. And at some point you just got to have fun and put the bat on the ball. Like think of it like the little bottle caps and sticks with the Dominicans, like learn how to hit things that move. Like your body will figure it out.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed in my time doing private lessons that there are some times where I get these kids. It's always the younger brother too. It's always the younger brother. You know, you train the older brother, and he's freaking his head's in a pretzel, and he's trying to do a perfect swing, and then you're like, all right, you know, good job. And then you get the younger brother in, and it's just like, whap, and you just crush the ball, and you're like, holy shit, like this kid has a lot of really good movements right here, you know. And I laugh too with a couple of our pitching instructors, because there's this kid, kid loves fishing. He'll just talk to me about fishing all the time and stuff. And he's first time I trained him, his dad's like, yeah, he hits lefty and righty. I don't know, he just really likes baseball and stuff. And I'm watching him just swing in there, and he has to be like 8 or 9 years old, something like that. And I call the pitching coach over. I was like, yo, watch this. And I'm just watching him just swing. Kid's just hacking. And he's like making these really good movements. And then he flips around and he goes to the right side. Same thing. I'm like, you know, what am I going to do with this kid right now? Like, I'm going to freaking, oh no, you need to, like, no, let's practice hitting the baseball now. All right, I'd say to him all the time, all right, we're going to do batting practice now. I'm going to strike you out as many times as I possibly can right now. Like, prove me wrong. And he's like, all right, like, let's do it. Like, that's just what I've realized, where I think, you know, maybe as a younger instructor, I might have been like, okay, well, he needs to be this more or whatever. And now it's just like, dude, this kid makes really good movements for a young guy. Like, let's try to challenge him. All right, well, what if when I throw the ball here, like, how are you going to hit that? And I'll ask him questions, and the interest and the love is just there. And that's why I tell his dad so many times, like, he's starting to make even better movements just from practicing, you know. And it's hey, let's make this fun for him, so he keeps up with the trend of wanting to practice this, because he already has some things without even having any idea of what he's doing. He already has some good movements. I think for us to practice loading, I was like, hey, what happens before you throw your fishing rod out there? He's like, I gotta go like back to get some power so I could throw far. I was like, all right, now let's think about, you know, where the bat wants to go, and let's just like load up and think about it like that, you know, not like cast in the hands or anything like that, but just something has to happen before we go forward. And then he was like obsessed with that, and it just seemed to work out for him. And it's so refreshing, you know, going from working with the 22, 23-year-old college guy who has some knowledge over the swing, and he's kind of like feeling the heat of playoffs coming around, or, you know, he's hit a bit of a lull in his senior season, and he's like, I feel like I'm doing this, but I don't know. And then, you know, at the end of the day, I'm going and I'm working with this 8-year-old kid, 9-year-old kid who loves the fish and makes some moves better than the 22-year-old. And it's like, you know, what am I going to do? Coach those movements out of this guy right now, you know?
Yeah, I love that you keep saying movement, because for me, that's kind of, like you said, like your number one thing for a college, you know, recruiting thing would be more athletic, be more versatile. Like the quality of movement is the key to me. And it's like, another thing, I think we're just seeing a little less of it because they are being structured and overcoached maybe at a younger age. By the time I'm seeing them at 12 or 13 years old, their movements are very rigid. And on the you know, on the mound, they might throw hard or whatever, but then they just get in the cage and they can really only repeat this one movement pattern over and over and over again. They just don't have that adjustability in their swing. They're not very athletic. And then, you know, another thing we haven't really hit on, and you guys, you know, this may have come through your brain or whatever, but might not. Another thing that I noticed in the big leagues is the guys who are on the field all the time aren't necessarily, kind of flip-flops. They're not necessarily the best hitters because everybody can hit a little bit. They're the best defenders. And the best defenders know how to move. Like, so if you're not addressing that part of your game as a kid, like you just think you can take lessons, man, I'm sorry. Like you could just go watch the plays that are made on a nightly basis. Like the once in a lifetime highlight type plays that are just inning after inning. These guys are so good.
Yeah, so you sound like me before, you know, some of my kids' freaking middle school tryouts. Their parents being like, well, what do you think? I'm like, wear a belt, first of all, to tryouts. Wear a belt. Make sure you're wearing baseball pants. and hustle everywhere, backup plays. Like, I know you're talking about just general athletic, well, not general, but like superstar level athleticism and the types of defenders that are at the big league level. But, I can't tell you how many kids that I train as hitters, and I'm like, make sure you're working on your defense. You need to be defensively sound. Where are you trying out? Like, what position are you trying out for? Are you defensively sound in that position? If not, what are you doing to get better at it? And then in the tryout setting, hustle everywhere. Go to your primary position. Take reps at your secondary position. Be good at catching fly balls. Be good at making the routine plays. Know your backup assignment. Know how to wheel on a bunt play. Back up the pitcher with guys on base if you're playing a middle infield position. If you're playing third base and there's a pickoff, back up the pitcher when the ball's going back. Like, those conversations are had so consistently, and I'm their hitting coach.
Mm-hmm.
And but hitting is, I've said this to players before, like, I'm like, you can get the ball, technically, you could get the ball hit to you 20 times in a game. You cannot get 20 at bats in a game. So you do need to be defensively sound, unless you're somebody who is literally, I mean, even the guys that are banging the ball all over the place. We've got, good guys on our bench right now that are good hitters, but defensively, it's like, he's not an option here. He's not an option here. And, this is who our DH is. Like, we got one DH. There's one DH. You know what I mean? So, like, you need to be able to play a position. And if you could play multiple positions effectively, you will always be an option in the game. And if you could run, dude, too, like, there's value in guys that, got a pinch run for the DH in a late game where we need a run. There's value to that as well. And that's so overlooked. Being a quality base runner, holy shit, man. That is like the difference between winning and losing a baseball game sometimes.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, listen, we're hitting coaches. Hitting's the hardest thing to do in sports, and it's said all the time that you have to hit your way to the big leagues. Like, if you can't hit, you can't perform in the minor leagues offensively. Like, you're not going to the big leagues. But if you can't play defense, you have to be a top 30, 50 hitter in the big leagues to stick around. If you're going to DH or play first or a terrible left field or something, like, you have to be one of the best on the planet. So if you can't, then we're kind of wasting our time. You'll get closer, but yeah, like, if you can't play a premier position or you can't play a couple other positions well, then you have to be really, really good. And if we don't have the physicality to move that way, then it's like you see the end. I get asked from some parents. It's like, and I won't comment on specifics publicly, but the question's asked, like, how many guys in the minor leagues, or how many guys on the roster, like, do you feel like have a shot or don't? And the ones that don't, it's just they can't. They don't have a position, in my opinion, or they don't have the makeup. They play a position, but they don't have the makeup for it, specifically a catcher, or they can kind of play and they can kind of hit, but it's yeah, like, and that holds true. I mean, we're talking about pro ball, but that holds true for college also. Like, you've said it probably twice an episode, where, like, yeah, like, you can hit a little bit and this and that, but we just don't have a spot for him. We can't put him in the outfield. He's not our best hitter at first. He can't catch. He's not playing.
I mean, even the catching position, we got, it's always been a thing, but, like, you got catchers who, some guys really struggle offensively. They're not, obviously, when we talk about the big league level, they need to be serviceable, but how many catchers have you heard of that have had long big league careers because they were so good defensively? I'm sure between the three of us, we can name a bunch of them. There's value to that, and obviously, at the catching position, it's that position specifically has changed. I mean, a lot, especially in the last decade. But it holds true. Guys that are able to play that position well stick around the game a hell of a lot longer.
Yeah, I'd add that, like, even like if you're talking about like a 13, 14, 15-year-old kid, that, like, when we're talking about guys who are bad defensively in the big leagues and even probably in the minor leagues, they're still really good athletes. Like there's, like, I can think of, a backup catcher in the big leagues right now who is the worst athlete on his team every year, but he was a college or high school, like, great basketball player, very good football quarterback. Like, he was a good athlete. You're just on the field with super athletes at that time. But like, if you're not a great athlete at 13, 14, 15 years old, spend more time on that and less time worrying about how hard you hit the ball or how hard you throw it.
And what do you like for you? What does that look like? Because we talked about this last week with the guy that we had on, Tom Downey. We talked about how the specialization in our sport is just, I feel like it's rampant, and it goes into the parent seeing how difficult it is for people to become like a high level college athlete, and then talking about playing professionally. They see that, they see how challenging it is, and they want to rush to get kids not playing other sports or just not practicing their overall athleticism. We need to invest all of our time and money into a hitting coach, into a catching coach, into a pitching coach, or an infield, outfield coach, whatever you name it, and put them on the best team in our area or region. But they get scared of kids playing other sports. Like, what does that look like to you? Help having a kid, like, how does that look? Having a kid become more athletic, what do they have to do that?
Um, for the sake of not sounding too much like an old man, but put down the phone, get outside, play multiple sports if you can. If you're not going to play multiple sports, then get in some sort of training environment that allows you to develop good movement, to you know run, jump, skip, learn how to run. Put them in track, put them in. I mean, if I had to do it all over again, my kid would have done wrestling and gymnastics, because wrestling for this and gymnastics for everything else, and then baseball or whatever skill specific thing. Um, um, like, I think you just can't hyper focus on the skill before you have a foundation of movement. And so, like, prioritize that foundation of movement, however that looks for you, whatever's in your community, whoever's good. And if all it is earn your screen time by going outside and running and you know climbing trees, then that's better. I just think so much. You know, I say it to the kids that are training at my place right now, like, how much of your day are you doing sitting? Like, you're sitting at school, you're sitting in the car to come here, you're sitting, going home, you're sitting on your phone, like you're on a computer, whatever. And we've gotta try to reverse that in the hour you're working out with me before you come hit. And it's gonna be tough, but um, but like, if you're not doing other things, then you got to find a program that can kind of help reverse all of that, you know, not moving and putting your hips in external rotation and losing internal rotation. And, now I can't separate my hips and blah, blah, blah. Like, just, it's a epidemic.
Yeah, I think a lot of people listening might hear that as that's so much work I'm going to have to do. But the way you feel, especially from a mental perspective, the way you feel when you're moving around, whether it's structured in like a training session or it's just practicing, or if you're outside riding a bike or moving around with your friends, how your body feels, and then in turn how your um, mentality is, also like physically how you might look or perceive yourself, which is super important, especially at a young age. That's just all like, it's just such a better experience. And I think you're not necessarily aware of that unless you've done it. Whereas if you take someone like, certainly yourself, and I think Dwayne and me as well, is if you take someone that's used to moving around and then you put us sitting for a long time, and then we're not outside, we're not doing these things, we're not moving in certain ways, like, you feel stiff, you feel sluggish, you feel um, a bit depressed in the sense that you're not excited about moving because you're like, "Ah, I don't feel like it kind of hurts." And that's the environment that, like, we're just growing up in. these days. So then, you're combating all of that plus social medias, and just looking at the phone and the screen and all that. That's a net negative, at least if you use it too much, which I think we all are. And then now you're like, hey, I got a hitting lesson. And it's like, it's not, yes, we're doing it for a living, like the three of us, but it's like, this isn't really what you need right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'll use it as a platform to try and, talk about some of these other things, and we'll weave it in, but it's, yeah,
It's an uphill battle, but that's where, like, I think, again, I just listened to the Taylor podcast, so I keep thinking back to that one. But I think, Kyle, you talked about like how much you can do if you own your own business by yourself versus maybe you own a smaller percentage, but you surround yourself with good people and you can possibly do more. That's kind of the direction I'm trying to take, and we'll see how this goes. Where the guys who are I'm training right now, they come in for 2 to 2.5 hour slots where they get their throwing, their arm care, their hitting, and strength and conditioning that's appropriate for their age, or movement training. Um, um, and I make less per kid, obviously, because I'm sharing that with a throwing coach and, an arm care guy, but hopefully we'll be able to affect many more kids in this way. Cause for me, the weekly 30-minute one-on-one, I didn't feel like I could affect change very well that way. So we'll see. I'll let you guys know how it goes. But so far, it's enjoyable, if nothing else.
So, Tim, that's something I want to talk with you more about. But we are over 2 hours in, and it's long overdue for us to take a bathroom break.
Okay.
So, let's take a break, do that, and then I want to hit on that more once we come back. So usually there's a point in the podcast, like an hour and 10 to like an hour and 40, where we just kind of like the conversation just hits like an awkward pause for maybe like 5 or 6 seconds, which feels like 15. And then it's like, okay, bathroom break. And we didn't hit that, but I had to go. So I was like, okay, we gotta transition right now.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how y'all worked that, so I tried to make sure that I had everything I needed, like water, and had gone to the bathroom before this started.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't tell you beforehand.
No worries.
It's informal. You could have been like, hey, hold on. That would have been fine. Sorry. But, Dwayne, you let us know when you're...
Yeah, I'm just emailing for one of these jobs, and 1 second.
Yeah, I had a bunch of text messages I was trying to respond to real quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the one downside of a Monday morning, is usually a lot of stuff goes on, but that is the affiliate off day for myself.
There you go. Yeah, Barnes and I had a podcast last year, and I told him once the season started there was no way we were going to keep up with it. And he's like, "Oh yeah, we will." And nah, it ended about a week into the season.
Yeah, it's been a challenge. The two of us had enough episodes recorded and scheduled, like, week after week, to get us towards the back end of spring training. I didn't record any. We didn't record
close.
Anything.
We were close.
Yeah, we almost made it. We were scrambling to get the thing going. We decided we would do this in the very end of December. And then we were kind of like, because the two of us had done a leadership Zoom call with players in the past. So we had done something similar, and we were thinking of expanding that somehow, but we didn't know how to balance, hey, we could have 4 or 5 kids on, and it'll be like this awesome, really intimate thing, and we'll make like $80 each, which was fun, but it was just like, it wasn't going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Or we could try to get 30 kids on the call and charge less and do this whole thing, but then like, I don't know, and we were just like, just make it a podcast. So then it became, and it sounds like you've gone through it, like getting the equipment and figuring out how to post it and record it and edit it.
Barnes did all that. I didn't do any of it. I just hopped on the calls when he told me to.
Got it. But yes, we were getting all that going. But the point is, we finished enough of the recording, so that way, like week after week, they were set up until like the end of March. And I was like, maybe I'll find, like we'll do one evening on like a Saturday or something in spring training, and then okay, we'll do it on Mondays in the off day, and then I just no time in spring training, and then first couple weeks at an affiliate's hectic because you're trying to move into your apartment, move into the place, get set up for the year, figure out what the hell's going on. So we're back though.
Yeah, we're back. It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun to do. I'm grateful that we pulled the trigger on it.
Yeah, it's like you guys are both still coaching, so you get these conversations organically. This is fun for me because I'm used to this kind of stuff on a daily basis, and I haven't really had it like I'm talking to parents and stuff like that now. But other than when like Barnes calls or every now and then Jason or Kanzer calls, then I can have a pretty in-depth conversation around coaching or hitting, but it's more rare than I'm used to.
Yeah. Well, you're certainly welcome to come back whenever. I appreciate you. But yeah, so what I wanted to, you hit on the business stuff before. So you had been in a minor league hitting coordinator for the Mets, which for people that don't know roughly what that means, basically you're in charge of all of the minor league hitting coaches in a nutshell and the minor league hitters. Um, and so you had experience running a department and having impact across all of the minor league hitters, although less directly, like with the player. And then you went and you're coaching the big leagues for a couple of years, and now it sounds like you're organizing a uh, training system or facility that you, I'm sure, are still actively coaching, but you have other people, other members of the team that are um, affecting the players also. And there's the business end of it. So you've had a training business before. This isn't your first time with that in the private sector. You've had leadership experience and you've coached hitting at the highest level, but now you're trying to throw it all into one thing, which I'm sure is exciting, but also different. Um, so tell us about that.
Um, so when I came home, I was when I first got home, I thought that I was going to be returning to the Reds, and so everything was cool. I was going to just do some lessons or whatever, just with local kids. Then when I found out I wasn't returning to the Reds, I started interviewing with pretty much a lot of different clubs for different roles. But I was kind of holding out for a coordinator gig because I wanted to be home. I wanted to be home more, and most of the coordinator gigs will let you live where you want, just kind of fly out to the affiliates. Um, and so I could work, in the morning on my computer, working through all the guys and whatnot. And then it's like those jobs weren't popping up. And so I started thinking, all right, what am I going to do? And I reached out to a handful of the guys that I've been working with, over the years that are in the big leagues now, and was like, would you want me to continue helping you? If so, how could that look? And so I got a handful of guys. I was like, okay, I can spend my mornings doing this, like kind of reviewing their data, or seeing what's going on, looking at video. And I was like, maybe I can make some money doing that. And then as it went, it's like, all right, that's not gonna be enough. So I'm doing more lessons, and I'm doing all these lessons and at this one facility, and you're making decent money, not as much as I was as a big league coach, but better than I would just about anything else. And but it's like you're trading time for money, and the only way to make more money is more time in the cage. And so I kind of look at that, and I'm looking at the fact that everything we're talking about, it's like I went out and helped a practice, and these are some kids I've been working with in the cage, and they're pretty high achievers for their age. And I went out and worked this practice, and I was like, oh my Lord, they don't know how to play baseball, and they don't move well. And I'm like, all right, how can we address this? Well, I did have a facility back before I got into pro ball, like Kyle said, and we had attempted something like this back then. I didn't have the resources to really do it well, or as well as I would have liked. And so I ended up, bringing in an organization to help pay the bills, and then everything gets messy when that stuff happens. So I'm like, all right, I've done this before, on a smaller scale. And just so happened around the same time I'm thinking about all this, the guy who worked at the same place with me, who's a pitching guy who I've got to watch for a few years, and I thought he did a really good job because he did prioritize moving better over just like throwing, for 30 minutes and trying to hit your spots or whatever, or like thinking about mechanics or whatever. I thought he did a good job. He kind of approached pitching and arm care similarly to how I do hitting. And he approached me with another guy and said, "Hey, we think we want to open up a new facility, and we'd like you to partner with us." And they moved on it quick. So I spent the last couple months wearing a lot of hats, opening this facility, doing DIY projects, learning how to lay turf and how to put up my lifting rigs and all that stuff. And so I've been in the mornings, I look over video for my pro guys, and I go up to the gym and I'm working and trying to get the place ready. It's in a good place now, like literally just within like the last week. Um, and we started in April. So April we started this program, and it's done well. It starts small. We've got probably close to 30 guys now. Started off at 20. We get a couple every week, it seems like. And it runs pretty smoothly. They come in on the hour, they stay 2 to 2.5 hours. They run through all their programming. The hitting part is hard to systematize because it kind of takes me looking at it and deciding what I want each guy to individually do so that it is individualized and it's not just them doing mindless reps. But everything else is pretty systematizable, and I just have some interns helping me either with running another cage or helping me stay on top of the weight room, making sure people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And we're probably going to keep it with that model for a while, unless the membership grows to the point where I need to hire somebody else to run one side or the other. But yeah, it's enjoyable. It takes somebody like the guy Matt who I'm working with, who's willing to like make less money for a couple months while we're building it. Same thing I'm doing, and somebody who's willing to kind of make sure the lights stay on. So luckily, I'm in a position to do those things for a couple months, and then we'll see. Like I said, we get to September, and if it's not working out, and I put my name back in the hat for some affiliate jobs, maybe I go back. I don't want to. This is what I want to do.
It's cool. It's an exciting change, and I can't help but think that the only way this thing can work, and it sounds like this is the approach you're taking, is just surrounding yourself with some good people that have the right intentions and good experience, but the right things in mind for the athletes, and that are willing to see the bigger picture of what the program and the culture can grow into, instead of like, hey, right now I didn't make what I could have made if I did this.
Yeah. You've got to kind of try to zoom out a little bit. And again, it's like what we were talking about earlier. It's like just trying to solve the problem that's in front of you. And like, it's obvious. I'm sure every coach you have on, every podcast we did last year with Barnes, everybody who's seeing it from the top down is seeing this like lack of athleticism. And it's like, it's obvious why, like we talked about with the environment we live in today. So it's like, all right, how can we offer something to address this, and to the best of our ability? The hardest thing is just space. Like, you need to move, you need a lot of space, and we have a pretty nice facility, pretty big, but it's still like quickly running out of space for the gym part.
How is the your experience with the Mets being in that coordinator position? Are some of the lessons learned there helping you get out ahead of some things now?
Um, I enjoyed that role. I wasn't looking to go to the big leagues. Took that interview because I was like, why not? And I'm glad I got it. Loved my time there. But the coordinator role is kind of fun because if you're gonna affect more people, then the way to do that is by helping coaches be better, right? So if you can help coaches, you know, uh, coach not just better, but like more efficiently and make change faster. Then and coming from the Astros, like I talk with Barnes about it all the time. Like we're somewhat spoiled because if we weren't there in that time, you don't really understand what it could be. So when you're in a new organization, um, especially one like the Mets that was such a big organization, like you kind of run into some bureaucracy and some like it's tough. It's like some red tape to get change made. Um, so like it was nice because I was aligned from the big leagues down, right? So I have the big league hitting coach who I'm close to, came from the Astros, who like we were aligned on what we wanted to do. It was just getting things done was very hard. And I was only there 1 year. I think maybe the next year we could have gotten some stuff done. It sounds like actually they've done a pretty good job over there now, getting some consistency. But that was the most of the battles weren't like around coaching or theory or anything like that. They were around like just like we want to implement this post game report, and it takes forever because it has to go through so many channels, whatever. So lessons learned, again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Is like I tend to really resonate with people that are in it for the reasons I'm in it for. And so learning to find value in people who don't have the same values I do is something that I'm still working on. But that was something that I was trying to, get better at, because I'm working with coaches who are there for different reasons. Like they're like they want to be in the big leagues. They want to, whatever it is. Their just values were a little different than mine. And so how to get the most out of them or the best out of them is something that again, like I'm still continually working on. But that was, when you become a coordinator, it kind of hits you in the face. You're like, oh, I got to get the most out of this person.
Yeah, that's a big transition where
Yep.
you're in a leadership position as a coach, and the people you're leading are players, and then there are leadership qualities with some of your peers. But then you go into a coordinator position, or you're in charge of a facility, or whatever that looks like, where now you have other coaches, other grown adults, that are leaders themselves that are under you.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you switch organizations, you inherit some staff that aren't, you haven't known them for a while, so the relationship's not there. And then you also, you didn't hire them. So then it's like you got to find common ground and learn on the fly, and also have things planned and prepared, but you're new. So it's with the Astros, we've had coordinator turnover, both internally and externally, just because guys have gotten good opportunities elsewhere. And each time someone comes in, it's like a relearning of who everyone is and what are we doing, and all that. And it's a challenge.
Yeah, a couple pissing competitions too here and there too, just to see who's smarter and who knows more. And how, like, I'm curious from your guys' perspective, because I've definitely seen it, from the levels that I've coached and worked and played at. But like, as far as like egos are concerned, like what's it like dealing with different like egos at that level? Because like, you talked about some red tape, Tim, and dealing with certain organizations, and I'm sure, you guys have both had experiences with different kinds of people, different personalities. So how was it that you guys felt that you, sort of found that common ground with those people?
Sometimes I didn't. Just to be honest, but I think a lot of it goes back to like just trying. It's the most simple way to put it again is trying to solve the problem in front of you. And it's like, all right, I don't agree with this person. Can we objectively discuss through these things? And I am somebody who would much rather have a tough conversation and get things right than just let things go. And so most of the time, I think once you do that, you might agree to disagree, but most of the time you can kind of start to find some common ground. Where I was probably not the most patient and probably the best version of myself that I could have been is just when I felt like things were not done in the player's best interest. They were done in the person's best interest. And I just don't have a ton of patience for that, I think. But again, it's a place that like I probably need to get better at, because people are just motivated for different reasons. And if you can get results and be motivated by something other than the player in front of you, then I guess that's how you do things. But that was the one kind of sticking point for me, typically, where I had a hard time as a coordinator and even as a coach, because you're in the locker room, you see and hear what people actually think versus what they portray in front of the player, and like sometimes I'd have issues with that.
Yeah, no, the only reason why I asked that is because, I've talked about this on this podcast a couple times, and I say this to a lot of people that I'm around on a regular basis, is that I feel most coaches, the common ground is that you want to help the player, and from talking to you over the last couple hours here, like that is what I gather from you, is that you're about what the player, like you're a player first type of person, which I appreciate so much, because, obviously a lot of people have different motivations for why it is that they do what they do, but at the end of the day, I like to think, and you can call me optimistic, but I like to think that we're trying to help players be better and get what they want out of this experience as a coach. It's really what our responsibility is, and I mean, again, no experience at the professional level. I know that, there's, we do this a certain way because we've done this a certain way type of approach, I'm sure, because it happens at every level. But when you have the player's best interests in mind, I would have to think that, even people that have the mindset that you do certain things a certain way because you've done it for X amount of time, if you can just simply say to them, like you said, I'm hearing these kinds of conversations from the players and it's just not effective. Like, I would have to think that those people at some point can say, maybe we need to change something.
Yeah, there's just so much in the big leagues. There's so much objective things you can measure. So it's just like at some point, I'm like, objectively, is this true or false? Like, if it's true, fine, I'll change my course. But if what you're doing can't objectively be shown to work, then we need to have a conversation, about it, doing things a different way. And most of the time that works. And there was only a couple times where it like probably led to other, it didn't resolve the situation more or less. But I think most people are there for the right reasons and they want to help players and whatnot. I just think people, especially when you start making, decent money, or you have a position that you really want to hold on to, like you start to try to validate your position over help the player. And that's, probably somewhat human nature, but like, I don't know, that's where, again, like I have a
It's
I have a hard time.
understandable because
Mhm.
if you're like, let's say you're making you're a new coach in the pro ball or in some like mid-range level of college, and you're making 45, 55 grand a year doing something, and you're going about it the way that you think is right, and you're sticking true to your values, and you're trying to help players and do all the right things. And then if you get put in a position where it's like, do I do that or do I want to keep the job? Well, it's not that hard to find another job that will pay you $45,000, $50,000.
Mhm.
You could do that on your own, doing lessons. You could find some other school. You could maybe not have another job in pro ball, but like you could do something else. When you're making a couple hundred grand, or you're 100 plus in a coordinator position or something, if you lose that job, now you're looking at, well, my life's going to look a lot different if I don't get another one of these. Like I've always been trying to go up, and ambition and doing the right thing, and super young and motivated, and like now I have it. I don't want to lose it. Like I could see why it could become a dilemma of, do I want to do what I think the player needs to hear, or do I want to do what's going to keep my boss at ease because I like having this. Um, and that's that's just a difficult thing. That's a reality once you've get to some of those positions.
100%. Again, and I'm not saying that I had the answers. I'm saying I'm probably somewhat flawed in the fact that I just couldn't, I couldn't put that aside and, row in the same direction as others sometimes. So, but
Well, I think that's why players and just people you work with that are cut a certain way respect you and have a certain like maintain relationships, like the people that you've mentioned. You're not working with them; they're not colleagues of yours anymore, but you're still on the phone with them. Um, and like players have, in my experience, players have been comfortable around you and have enjoyed being around you, and part of that's earned through making decisions that are with their best interest. And if you have to do something that might not be in their best interest, you're at least, to the best you can, like open and, hey, this is the reality. This is what we're dealing with. I'm sorry, like I'm here to support, but we got to do this. I think those things at the end of the day, when you zoom out past what our current title is, we're social animals. We're interacting with uh, other humans, other people. And I tend to think that those things are more important to stick to.
Yeah, me too. That's probably why I liked you from day one. So, that little backstory. First day, Kyle comes in to lift, and our hitting coach, Snitker, he's like, "Who's the machine?" And then he became known as Machine, at least from the time I was there. And he had a couple conversations with him about lifting and about different things, and found out that his love was catching. And I don't know if you remember, but I was quickly trying to recruit him to be a hitting coach. And he's like, I don't think I want to be a hitting coach. I want to do catching and some sort of hybrid role between catching and strength conditioning. And I was like, we need people who can think like you in the hitting department. Please think about it. So that was
I
great.
I didn't realize that you were trying to recruit me.
No, I
Um,
was.
yeah, no, you had asked me about some different things. Yeah, no, I mean that's your how you remember that story is accurate in the sense that I didn't want to be a hitting coach. I wasn't a good hitter. Just, I mean, I hit my senior year. I figured it out a little bit and hit like 290 with some extra base hits and whatnot. But I struck out a ton, didn't lift the ball. Despite being a good catcher, I just underperformed offensively to their end of the career. But I didn't pursue learning it after, and you get into pro ball and you're almost the same age as players, and I felt confident coaching catchers because I really understood that, and I had a strength and conditioning background. As I look back on it, my ego as a strength coach outweighed my ability to be a strength coach, where I used to say I could be a strength coach if I wanted to, which was probably true if I pursued it, but it just um like I've forgotten so much at this point, which I think you had mentioned something similar when we had those conversations back then. You're like, yeah, like I was, when I was younger, I'd study it in college and whatever, but um, at some point I decided I'd just take those principles and apply them to skill stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, point I'm getting at is it was very catching. I want to be in charge of catching. I want to blend, this is what I'm good at, and I want to create a wheelhouse for it. Um, and yeah, I didn't realize that you had hitting coach in mind then. Kanzler did also, and he asked me the same thing like the year later, and it was like, no, I don't want to be in the cage all day. Because my experience of coaching hitting was I'm feeding a machine and I don't know what's going on. So like I'm bored and confused. Like why would I coach this? um, but that's funny. Yeah, it's like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. Well,
We're
if it's
having,
worth anything, I believe coaches are. Um, it's more about how they think than what they think, and like you can coach anything. I mean, if you want to coach pitching, you would figure it out. If you wanted to be, an S&C coach, you'd figure it out because of the way you think, and that's where I found in the hiring process, it's so hard to figure that out on a Zoom call or whatever. So when I met somebody, I was like, let me figure out how I can get them. how can I get them over to the Mets with me? How can I get them to the Reds with me? Whatever it was, because I just wanted to surround myself with more people who thought through things in a kind of like an excellence mindset. You knew that you had that because just the way you went about your own workouts and the way you took care of yourself. It's like this guy is going to methodically think through things and figure out the best way to do them.
that's an interesting point about um, like you could figure out how to coach something. Where I feel like 3, 4, 5 years into coaching hitting, where I'm starting to be like, okay, I'm getting a lot more confident with this, and like when I have a gut feeling like, okay, I think this will work. be a little bit aggressive and say something, try something, and then have some success. You're like, okay, good. Like you get some reassurance. Um, but I think the reason I like coaching hitting so much now, and I've really been falling in love with it, is it's just a really difficult thing, but it's the medium is good. It's for the coaching itself, meaning that you have a lot of time with players. You have players that are constantly facing a challenge every game. And like you get time with them and you get to talk about the mental side of it. You can loop in some of their physical training. You can talk about like their attack plan. You could talk about movement stuff, the swing, and all of this. And it scratches a lot of itches within one position. So you get to do things from a holistic standpoint. So it's like hitting allows me to coach, which is the thing I love. And so that's been something I've discovered over the last couple of years that I didn't know was there.
Nice.
Which is I know it's something that we've chatted about, Dwayne, where we've just like how we've gotten into doing all of this.
Yeah, it's I agree with you because you go from, like, I think about the beginning of my hitting coaching in general, being like an instructor versus now where the conversations are a lot different, the structure is a lot different. The motivation is the same, meaning like I want guys to become better hitters, become better baseball players, but a lot of the conversations around the cage are a lot different than, all right, I'm here to do, a lesson with Jimmy over here, and this is what he doesn't do right. This is what we need to do better. And it's a lot of like, hey, why is this happening? What do you think about this? What do you think? Like, there's a lot more questions that I ask now versus in the beginning. It was like, okay, this is the problem with the swing. This is how we kind of need to help him get to that. And I feel like when there's more questions around that, like I'm coaching more, which is ultimately why I got into, becoming a hitting coach or a catching coach. Was I was a coach first, so I think that definitely, I think I can relate to what both of you guys are saying in that regard. And I'm glad that you guys brought that up because that was something that I wanted to ask you earlier, Tim, when you talked about your experience as an infielder, and and not knowing, you as a hitter from a hole in the wall. It's like, you get into becoming a hitting coach and hitting coordinator and everything. Like, did you feel that that's what you were specialized in? Like, I know for me personally, I had a lot of experience as an outfielder and as a catcher, as a player, and I think where my shortcomings are in regards to like coaching infielding. I know certain things to look for just from being around guys who are really good infielding coaches, and you can see certain small things here or there, but like I wouldn't give me a good, high school or college level baseball player and say like, here, make this kid a better infielder right now. Like, would I do my best to try and find a way to help them? Yeah, absolutely. But, I think right now I wouldn't, have trust me with developing a freaking infielder right now. I just know myself.
Hitting was probably always my lens that I was the most interested in. I kind of viewed everything under that, right? So like I was like looking at this and making correlations, like because when I was a high school coach, I was also the pitching coach and also the middle infield coach, and so I'm just like seeing these connections between good movement, right? Like turning a double play and hitting, and kinematic sequence and throwing and hitting, and like these things before they were measurable. I'm just kind of viewing it and making these connections in my brain about, okay, these guys, are down there teaching high schoolers to throw 90 by changing these movement patterns. Well, can I do the same thing with a hitter? There's just stuff like that. Kind of just a curious lens, I guess, or how I was looking at things. Um, uh, I still like, I go back to the movement thing all the time, just because I think like if you can understand, you don't have to be a biomechanist, but if you can just understand good movement and what it looks like and um, what kind of gets in the way of it, and like try to kind of reverse engineer that, then it's pretty, I wouldn't say easy, but it's much easier to see when things are off with any of these things we're talking about. And I would assume even catching would be the same thing. Um, so yeah, I mean, I didn't know. Again, it was never my goal to be in the major leagues. It was never my goal to be in professional baseball. Like my goal was to make a living, scratch out a living, doing things I enjoyed. And I probably enjoy providing roadmaps for people more than I do anything else, whether or not that's for getting in shape, whether or not that's for hitting a baseball, whatever. I just so happen my life has taken me in the direction where hitting a baseball is what I know the most about. So it's where I can affect the most change, in my opinion. But it was never a goal. I would have been perfectly happy, uh, being a high school coach for the rest of my life. Like, I wasn't even that though when I got hired. I was like I said, I was off the reservation, no baseball at all at that point.
Tim, I want to ask you about that because um, we talked about you as a player, and then we've certainly talked about coaching a ton, and we'll continue to do so. But that gap where it sounds like you were a teacher, you were in and out of coaching high school or doing some stuff on the side. Um, I'm curious about that time period because from what I know about you and what you've shared so far is you take a very holistic view in terms of the person in front of you from a mental, spiritual, physical, like a strategic and skill focus, like all the different things, right? Now, hitting a baseball is the thing that, like you said, you feel you're most knowledgeable about, but that's not the only thing. And you tie some other stuff in, which I appreciate coaches. I think the most highly of coaches that have that approach, which makes me tend to think that there are some other experiences you've had, what sounds like in late 20s into your 30s, that are a little bit different than what we're talking about. Is that fair?
Yeah, I'd say I think Taylor hit on it. I think you guys have hit on it some. Like you start playing baseball when you're 4 years old. It's all you do. Again, my dad was my coach. Uh, it was my identity, very much so. And when I quit teaching and I opened my first gym, um, I was still using baseball as kind of a medium to educate and do whatever. But I wasn't going to work and teaching in a classroom every day. So I was like, I had more free time and I just was more focused on who do I want to be? Like, how do I want to live my life? Um, kind of went through a divorce in that time. Met who's now my wife. My kids were, my daughter was a teenager. My son was, preteen, whatever. Just spending time with them, just read a ton, started going camping a ton, like traveled as much as I could, like just tried to do all the things I never did before. Um, um, I think when I was in education, again, I was like really interested in motivation and how the brain works and how you learn. So like that kind of stuff, I tried to take that into you know baseball, and then I don't know. Like I said, it's probably like a 2 year period, wasn't that long, but like a 2 year period where I was just like, I don't want to go to a Major League Baseball game. I don't want to go, I don't want to talk about it at family events. Like, I just want, like, I'd rather talk about camping or fishing or something like that. And, you know, stoicism, whatever I happened to be reading at the time. Um, so that's kind of where I was. And really my only kind of tether to the game at that time was Barnes, because he was in Australia coaching, and he would still like call me for help. And then, uh, Yeah, I don't know. It's a grateful time because I feel like the person you know now that's when that person started. Like up to that point, I was who I thought I was supposed to be as a kid, right? Like I got a job teaching, coach, high school baseball coach, got married, had two kids, had a house, had a lot of debt, had my two dogs, whatever. Like I had that American dream, and then got divorced and decided I wanted to be this version of me, more or less. So you would have met a different version, prior to like 2010, somewhere in there. Got into jiu-jitsu, started doing that. I'm probably the world's longest blue belt. I've been a blue belt for like 10 years or more because I just don't train ever. I go like 4 months out of the year and then don't train because of seasons or whatever. So that's one of my goals, is to make enough money where I can get back into that and get my purple belt. But that's just so again, another kind of thing. I actually coached kids in jiu-jitsu for a little bit. Like I just enjoy coaching and learning new things. Other than Spanish, I'm not quite like Kyle. I couldn't just dive in and learn it. I'm still horrible.
The machine.
The machine.
Yeah. Well, learning the Spanish was easy. When you're 26, 27, and you're single, you can pick up and go to the Dominican Republic to learn. Um, but I wouldn't be willing to do that now. And certainly not with, family and all that. But I love hearing the story, and it's interesting, and it's why the conversations have some depth and some different. They go to different places besides baseball and what happened on the field just then or last night. Um, I'm curious what your thoughts are, since you've had some non-baseball life experiences, especially during that 2 year period. Um, what how that's maybe shaped how you are during the season and maybe the off season in terms of separating from baseball and having some colorful non-baseball experiences during the season, and then also in the off seasons, like how just what your approach is to that, or maybe some recommendations you have to, frankly, myself, or just any coach in a similar realm as Dwayne and I.
Yeah, I wish I was really better at turning off than I am. I'm not very good at turning off. It's probably why I went from one identity and just totally tried to shed it, and then back into it and trying to keep that balance. I think in the season, like off days was pretty much always just like take care of things I can't take care of on a daily basis, and then go on a hike and be in nature and stuff like that. Like I was not like like that's pretty much what my off day looked like every time. If I was in a different city, I would try to, I just wanted to be outside. I wanted to walk around and see stuff. Uh, wasn't like there was no big plans on off days. Um, but I'd come home. I'd be very, ready to be home. Season's super long. See family. I'm blessed that my family, both my kids and my mom and my brother, like we can go months without talking, and then when we see each other, we just pick right back up. That's not. I don't feel like I need to like reach out on a nightly basis. About the only person I did that with was my wife. But even then, she was joking last night because she was on her phone while we were watching TV, and I'm like, "Can you not just put it away?" More or less. And she's like, "You don't understand. I'm used to you never being here, and when you are here, or when we would talk, we'd talk for 10, 15 minutes, and then you'd go to sleep." She goes, "So I've learned how to cope or whatever." And so like that was kind of my routine after the game. Give her a call, but a lot of times it was late. That's late. Um, she did travel to see me quite a bit, so we saw each other a lot, like at least once a month. She would travel to come hang out, which was cool. Like see different cities. Try to always like do it with an off day, and then we could go do something. Um, but yeah, by the time Christmas is over, I'm ready to be back in baseball. Like that's the way I kind of got. I'd say when I first got into, like when I was first with the Astros, I probably wasn't as bad. But yeah, by by last year, like I'm ready to be back in spring training with the guys, and you know, like I wish I had a better answer for you. Like I said, I wasn't really great at turning off. Um, you know, I, one trick I do use still to this day if I feel like I'm over analyzing things is I just either read or listen to fiction, just get away from reality for a little bit. So I'm typically I go through periods where I'm just consuming a ton of like information, and then I'll try to just back off and check out and listen to fiction or read it.
Yeah, that's it's probably it's part of the reason why we got into it and liked doing it so much. I mean, I know for me personally, what I enjoyed the most was being around teammates as a player, just the camaraderie of it all. And then when you get into coaching, it's the same thing, but there's more levels to it because, you have your connections with the players, and then you have your connections with the coaches, and then when you're friends with it's easy to get how you're describing, because when you're friends with the guys you're working with, you're outside of practice time or game time, and you're talking about the shit you're doing in practice, and you're talking about good things too. Like I have a lot of conversations like we're having right now with the coaches that I work with, which I'm so grateful for. That I wouldn't say that we're all very like-minded, but we all have similar ways to go about what it is that we do, and we do take the player into consideration into a lot of decisions that we make, probably more times than we should. And like, I think about, our backup guys and bench guys, and how it is that we can be developing those people and making sure that they're feeling like they're getting cared for and tended to and developing, regardless of the fact that they're on the field helping us win right now. Because, I'm the type of person where I'll definitely lose sleep over like, damn man, I hope that so and so who's, a backup guy is enjoying his overall experience. I want them to make sure that they're having a quality experience and feeling like they're developing as well, because I care for everybody that I coach. So it's like you said, it's very hard to turn it off, and I'm very similar to you where I, go into the fictional world as well, and just, it's not easy. I definitely go through spells where I'm a lot better at it than like right now. Like right now we're, after this weekend, and not this weekend, but the next weekend's our conference tournament. So it's like, that fucking season went by so fast, which is insane. Where right now a lot of the attention is on what it is that we're doing as a team and what it is that we're doing as a staff to best prepare us for our last four conference games and for the tournament. So, I commend you, man, because, as a guy who, I consider myself an experienced coach, but I know that I am still a younger coach, and there's so much to learn still. I love getting to have a conversation with you and hear that there's always room for development and there's always room for improvement. It's inspiring for somebody like myself to know that at any point in your life you can make those kinds of changes, because I tend to think that, my biggest criticism of people in our game is that, guys feel like they get to the peak of the mountain and that, there's nowhere else to go. That's my biggest criticism of this game is we talk about how baseball is a game of adjustments, but there's so many people who act like, they've climbed the peak and they're the keeper of knowledge. And, that's just, it rubs me the wrong way about what it is that we do. And I can understand that why somebody wouldn't want to be a part of what we do. I like when you talked about getting away from the game completely, like there are times where I feel like that, man. There are times where I'm like, damn, I want to fucking do anything else. And but you'll find that anywhere. I've come to realize in my age is that in any line of work that you do, you'll find people that are like that, and you'll find just systems that are like that. So again, it makes me super optimistic to know that in life and in really in any profession that you can do things like you did. It's very inspiring to know that people are doing those kinds of things and making those kinds of changes.
Yeah, I want to kind of say something on that, but my iPad is at 1%. It was 100 when we started, so it has gone. It has gone all the way. I don't want it to die on us. What should we do here?
So, if you're unable to plug it in and move somewhere else, then
I can plug it in,
we
but I'm gonna have to pull up my headphones. Is the only problem.
I see. All right. Well, in that case, we'll probably have to, unless you could go to your phone, you could probably
Uh,
come back in from your phone.
yeah, my phone's fine. You want me to try to do
Yeah,
it? See
it'll
here.
work from your phone. You may have to leave and then rejoin,
Yeah, go back to that
but it'll be
thing you
the
sent
same
me.
link. Yeah,
Yep.
Dwayne and I'll just stick on. That should work.
Sorry, I've been like hoping it would hold on.
Did pretty well. That's a long 3 hour video call.
Kyle, would we have to end this one and try to upload it, or just have him rejoin on this one?
He is 99% uploaded,
Okay.
so I think it should be okay. But yeah, definitely just get it plugged in. That's probably the priority number one. Tim, if you want, you can plug the iPad in. Um, we'll just keep the call
Okay.
going, and then you could uh, text or call or whatever if we need.
Ooh.
It's such a nice day here. There's like not a cloud in the sky.
It's
And,
nice. It's nice here too. It's like 70 degrees and sunny. It's
oh,
great.
good for you.
I know.
Yeah. Dwayne, how many more games you guys have?
We have a non-conference tomorrow,
Oh,
and then
All right. How do just turn this off?
um, it says you're 100% uploaded. So
There you go.
yeah.
Okay.
yeah, we got
So
non-conference tomorrow and 4 more conference games this weekend.
okay. So Tim, it says so on the iPad. I think you'll have to leave, like hit end on the call,
Let me see where it
just so
is.
that it uploads. Okay, cool. So that
It's good.
it should be. I mean, it was 99 or 100%. So that this happened something like this before, and it's been good. So I'm not really too concerned.
Okay.
And you're recording on this one too, so um, yeah, should be good. Um, let me check one more thing. Yeah, I think we could just keep it rolling.
Hope so.
Yeah,
Don't cut
should.
any of that.
um,
Okay. So
yeah, you had some thoughts.
yeah. So I think the thing that like I've thought about a little bit since listening to a couple of y'all's other podcasts, and I've thought about it on my own as well, is that I've kind of somewhat come full circle. I'm still not really a fan. I don't really watch baseball or anything like that. Um, but I've come to accept that I am the happiest and the most fulfilled when I am pursuing something. And hitting is just the thing I know more than anything else. So I don't feel the need to turn off like I did prior to this, when I kind of checked out. Um, I think at the time I felt like, it may not be the healthiest version of myself, but in my current state, I do feel like it's the healthiest version of myself, and be it, creating my own business and trying to do it this other way. Hitting is just kind of again, like the vehicle for me. But like, I, I'm not the personality type who can sit still very long and like forcing myself to go to India and, do a silent meditation is probably just not going to make me happy. Where getting in a cage with some kids is going to make me happier. So, that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, well, I can certainly identify with that of like constantly needing to do something. The only times where I feel like I can really turn off or relax is if I'm doing it with like a close friend or a group of friends or family or something to that effect. Where if it's like, hey, tomorrow night you're gonna watch a 3 hour movie, I'd be like, that would just make me anxious and feel like I'm getting behind, and I would just think of the stuff I'm supposed to do, and it wouldn't. I would enjoy the movie, but it would come at a cost.
Hmm.
Whereas if, hey, you're gonna talk to Dwayne for 3 hours, or you're gonna do something like this, or you're gonna go hang out with someone, and you ended up just kind of doing something that was be equally as unproductive, I'd be just fine with it because it's like filling that social need. Um, so it's yeah, no, I definitely I don't think I could go do a silent retreat like that unless it was for a couple days and it was like deliberate. Um, but I could like being around family and friends during the season would be wonderful, or going in and out of it would be cool. That's a hard, if not impossible, balance to strike.
Well, the nice thing, like, um, when I went to work for the Reds, David Bell was the manager, and I can't imagine having a better human as my boss who was very aware of these things, and like work life balance was super important to him. So like he gave me time off to go to Tristan's graduation. Like he I think the year before my daughter graduated from college. So he gave me time off to do that. Like he's like, no. He actually found out from one of the other coaches that my daughter was graduating from college, and he came and told me, he's like, you're leaving. And I wasn't going to go. I wasn't going to ask for time off. Like, my first year in the big leagues. So like I had a great experience where like, you know, I didn't feel like I had to just grind and never see my family. Again, I scheduled it out pretty well to bring my wife out a lot, brought Tristan out a lot. You know, my mom came out a couple times. One of my best friends came out each year to spend a series with me. So, I just did stuff like that.
That makes all the difference. Just those check-ins and those things to look forward to, and those
Hmm.
even although they're brief, those little moments to separate and uh, keep those things, those relationships going. It's essential, but it's difficult when you're at a distance and you're at a distance super busy and you have something that you're pursuing, like you said, and that you're really passionate about, and that's fulfilling, but also draining and not them. So to wind it all or to weave it all together is, um, I just love asking people that are in similar positions to yourself, or that have similar experiences, because they're uh, they're active challenges for I think all of us.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was ready. Like I would have gone back to the Reds and enjoyed being in the trenches with the guys another year, but I was also very ready to like be home. Like when that didn't come, when that wasn't, an option, then like I said, I actually met with Aaron and y'all's director and talked about the AAA job, and it would have been close to home, and I was very intrigued, but it was early in the season, and it was like, I really want to try to find a coordinator gig. So, I kind of passed on some pretty good jobs because I was ready to be home. I was ready to see my dog and, uh, just hang out and cook dinner, not, do things like domestic things that I hadn't done in a long time.
I think it's important to hear that you could be wanting both of those things at the same time. Like you could be ready to be home and not do it ever again, and you could also be ready to go back and do it. Like you could be ready to go for the season, but also not want to leave because of family. Uh,
Hmm.
and it's not simple as like this or that, um, which is yeah, I think that's something I'm learning as I continue to do this, is that you could be sad to leave for spring training, but also glad you're there.
Yeah, I think the key is just surrounding yourself with people who are happy for you and support you. Like if that's what you have, then you're not going to feel or at least in my experience, you don't feel the like you're having to make a choice, right? Because those people, while I miss them, they're extremely happy to come see me, to come be a part of my world at that time. Um, you know, like I said about Tris, like I missed his high school career, but he wouldn't change it for anything, and he got to take BP at Fenway and go into the wall and sign his name and stuff like that. And like those are experiences that not very many people get to have. And uh, that's what the perspective I tried to keep even when I was in the minor leagues. Like my buddies would come out, they'd be so stoked to come see a minor league game and like come take pictures and whatnot. And it's like whether or not that was what my goal had been all along, I I wanted to share the experience with them, even if it meant more to them than it meant to me. Like to me, it's just another game, right? And so, but that was a big motivator, kind of for me to stay in that world. But it's 7 years. It was just it was time to try something else.
Yeah, I think the people in your life understanding why it is that you do and what it is that you're doing is so key. I think a lot in anything that you can do when you put the amount of effort that people like yourself and Kyle and I try to put into what it is that I do, we can, and for me anyways, I always think about those things that I miss, and I think about the time that I miss with the people that I do care about, and it can definitely weigh on you a little bit, or a lot, depending on the day. But I think when they understand that you love what you do and that you put your freaking soul into these things, they respect it, and they can admire it, and it makes those times like just last night we had a doubleheader, and right after that, usually on Sundays when we're home and I got some time, I'll go over to my parents' house and we'll have dinner and we'll watch a couple movies and hang out, and it makes those times that much sweeter. So I, I I'm glad that we're sharing those things on this episode today, because I think that a lot of times it's like Kyle said, it's perceived as a choice of one or the other. And I was thinking about this actually last night, because we're coming to the end of the season, and we're getting close to conference tournament time, and at the end there's going to be guys that we're saying goodbye to, and in the college baseball world too, like coaches leave to take other jobs, in the professional level, coaches leave to take other jobs. It's guys are moving up and down at your guys' level, at the pro level, and for us, like I said, we're saying goodbye to seniors whose careers are likely ending, and just being where you're at the time, and being good to the people that you're around is so important. Like I still think about, on pretty much a daily basis, I still think about my teammates, and my former teammates, and I try to stay in touch with those guys as much as possible. And like you talked about your buddies coming down to minor league games and big league games and hanging out with you. That shit is shit's so awesome, man. That's what we love about this stuff. And it's nice to talk about. And I feel like almost every single episode that we have, we end up getting to conversations like this, and just it builds and adds to the community feel of, I think what Kyle and I are trying to do with this is, the more people I talk to, like yourself, who we haven't had a conversation prior to today, but it just feels like we've opened up that community conversation, because that's really what it is. And it's just a never ending, never, it doesn't stop. Like the idea of this baseball community and this professional community and this, the amateur level, it's so intertwined, and our experiences are so similar, our motivations are so similar, and our feelings about what it is that we do are so similar. So I like people to hear these kinds of conversations, because when you're in the grind of it, it can feel so like lonely sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely can get lonely when, like I said, I kind of hinted at it, but like I lived, even in big leagues, I lived in my van and, in the stadium. So I literally would just walk out to the parking lot, go to sleep, wake up, go back to the weight room and, work out the next day before everybody showed up. So, I'm not around, like not walking to an apartment and having a roommate. I was pretty much by myself the whole time. So luckily I'm pretty good at being by myself, but, uh, yeah, it had some lonely nights.
Yeah, no, that's part of it. You you have those times where you're walking back to your car to drive to your apartment, or walking back to your van, and you're saying to yourself like, what the hell am I doing this for? And how am I going to get, or, you know why you're doing it, but like you're struggling. You got a list of guys that are going through it and you're trying to help and you don't know why. And then you have other moments where they have some success and you're excited for them and they overcome some things. Um, and it's very full, which is something not to be taken for granted. Um, it's definitely draining, but it's certainly um, it's a lot more. It's a lot more real. Feels like it matters more. At least it can. Uh,
Yeah,
when
I mean, that relationship you have with your players is it is your family during the season. And like, just like any relationship, like a lot of the richness comes from the highs and the lows, right? So like if it was all highs, then there's, you don't appreciate it quite as much. And if it's all lows, it's going to be tough to make it through the year. So like that's probably why, the lonely times are away from the field. But like when I'm there, no, I'm fully, kind of invested in, those guys for that day. So
Yeah, well, that's really well said, Tim. I want to thank you so much for agreeing to spend this much time with us. Um, I we could keep having this conversation for much longer, but we've got to start our day, all three of us. Um, I really appreciate you, the relationship we've had from when I first joined Pro Ball. You were one of the first people that you latched on to me. You were definitely, uh, would sit down at lunch or breakfast and just talk about whatever. A lot of times it wasn't necessarily baseball, which I've appreciated, and we've kept in touch. And I knew I was telling Dwayne last night, I was like, Tim's gonna be great. He's just really easy to talk to and got a lot of insight and like the way he thinks about things. So thank you so much for joining. Best of luck with your new ventures with the business. You are always welcome to join if you got something to update with, or if you just want to have one of these chats in a couple months, then the door's open.
well, you guys just holler at me when you need to kill some dead air, and I'll hop on if you can't find somebody more interesting than me. We'll talk about something. But
Yeah.
no, thank you guys too. It was, like I said, it was enjoyable for me. I haven't had to think about hitting in depth too much before this for a couple weeks, so this has been nice. And uh, Kyle, I think if you stick with it and your BP stays good, you'll find yourself at the higher levels pretty quick. Um, I know if I was there, I'd be trying to promote you every chance I got. So, um, Dwayne, sounds like you're doing good work. And maybe keep your contact to see if I can send some of these high school kids out toward the Northeast.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, man. This has been a really enjoyable episode, and I look forward because we're gonna have you on again. And I appreciate your time so much, and I wish you the best of luck with everything because you got the right intentions, and I know if you don't got the blueprint, you're gonna find it, and you're gonna find 100 different blueprints to figure it out with your athletes. So I'm grateful for you being on here, and I'm also grateful that there's somebody like yourself caring for these athletes out there. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Thank you.